I sat alone at a table set for 12, staring at the clock as it ticked past 8:30, and I realized that the worst kind of silence isn't the absence of sound, it's the absence of the people you love when you need them most. My name is Patricia Brennan, and I'm 63 years old. I've lived through marriages and divorces, births and deaths, triumph and failure. I've weathered storms that would have broken younger, stronger people. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the moment when I understood that my own daughter had decided I wasn't worth showing up for. Let me tell you where I'm starting this story, because if you've ever felt invisible in your own life, if you've ever questioned whether the people you've sacrificed everything for actually care, then you'll understand exactly what I'm about to share. And please, leave a comment below telling me where you're watching this from, because I want to know I'm not alone in this. I want to know that somewhere out there, someone understands what it feels like to be forgotten by the people who should remember you most. The balloons I'd blown up myself that morning, 63 of them, one for each year, still bobbed cheerfully against the ceiling of my dining room. The cake I'd ordered from Magnolia Bakery, the same place I'd gotten Emma's birthday cakes when she was little, sat untouched on the counter, its pink frosting beginning to weep in the warmth of the room. I'd set out the good china, the set my mother had given me when I got married the first time, nearly 40 years ago. I'd folded napkins into little swans, something I'd learned from a YouTube video the week before, feeling foolish but hopeful as I practiced the folds over and over. I'd sent the invitations 3 weeks early. Not just to Emma and her husband Brandon, but to my sister Judith, my brother-in-law Paul, my nephew Tyler, my old colleagues from the library where I'd worked for 30 years before retiring, my book club friends, my neighbors from down the street. 12 people in total. 12 people I'd thought cared enough to give me 3 hours on a Saturday evening. The roast I'd spent all afternoon preparing was drying out in the oven. I could smell it beginning to burn at the edges, that acrid scent of meat cooked too long, but I couldn't bring myself to get up and turn off the heat. I just sat there, my hands folded in my lap, wearing the navy dress I'd bought specifically for this occasion, my hair freshly colored at the salon that morning to cover the gray that had been creeping in more aggressively lately. My phone sat on the table in front of me, face up, screen dark. No calls. No texts. No running late messages. No so sorry, something came up excuses. Just silence. I kept thinking someone would arrive. That maybe there'd been some miscommunication about the time. That maybe they were all planning some kind of surprise entrance. But as 8:30 became 9 o'clock, and 9 o'clock crept toward 9:30, the reality settled over me like a heavy blanket, suffocating and undeniable. Nobody was coming. I thought about Emma's voice on the phone 2 weeks earlier when I'd called to confirm she'd received the invitation. "Yeah, Mom, I got it," she'd said, her tone flat, distracted. I could hear Netflix playing in the background, could picture her on her couch, barely paying attention to our conversation. "Brandon and I will try to make it." Try to make it. To your own mother's birthday dinner. Try. I should have known then. I should have heard the dismissiveness in those words, should have recognized the pattern I'd been ignoring for years. But I'd pushed it aside, told myself I was being paranoid, oversensitive. Emma was busy with her own life. She and Brandon had jobs, responsibilities, a social calendar that didn't always align with mine. I was just her mother. I should understand. Except I'd never been just anything to Emma. I'd been everything. I'd raised her alone after her father walked out when she was 4 years old. I'd worked double shifts at the library and taken on freelance editing work at night to pay for her dance classes, her art supplies, her college application fees. I'd driven her to auditions and recitals and debate tournaments, sitting in parking lots and gymnasiums for hours, cheering louder than any other parent. I'd co-signed her student loans, helped with her rent when she first moved to the city, given her the down payment for the condo she and Brandon bought 3 years ago. I'd been there for every milestone, every crisis, every triumph. And now, on a night when all I wanted was to be surrounded by the people I loved, to feel like my life mattered to someone, she couldn't even be bothered to show up. At 9:45, I finally turned off the oven. The roast was ruined, charred black on the outside. I threw it in the trash, still in the roasting pan, too exhausted to care about salvaging the expensive cookware. I put the untouched cake in the refrigerator. I collected the china plates, the swan napkins, the champagne flutes I'd chilled in the freezer, and I put them all away with mechanical precision, my hands moving while my mind went somewhere else entirely. I didn't cry. I think I was too shocked to cry. Instead, I sat back down at the empty table and I did something I probably shouldn't have done. I opened Facebook. I opened Instagram. And I scrolled. There was Judith, my sister, posting photos from a restaurant downtown with her husband and some friends I didn't recognize. Best Saturday night ever, the caption read. She'd posted it at 8:15, right around the time she was supposed to be at my house. Tyler, my nephew, had posted a video of himself at a bar, doing shots with his buddies. The timestamp said 7:43. My book club friends had organized a movie night. I could see them all tagged in Janet Holbrook's post, smiling in front of the AMC Theater on West 34th Street. And then I found Emma's story. My daughter's Instagram story. She and Brandon were at Rosewood, an upscale restaurant in Brooklyn that required reservations weeks in advance. Emma was wearing a red dress I'd never seen before, her hair styled in loose waves, her makeup immaculate. Brandon had his arm around her, both of them smiling at the camera with wine glasses raised. Date night with my favorite person, the caption read, with a heart emoji. I stared at that image until my phone screen dimmed, until I had to tap it to bring the brightness back. I zoomed in on her face, looking for some sign of guilt, some shadow of awareness that she'd just blown off her own mother's birthday party. But there was nothing. Just happiness. Just a beautiful young woman enjoying an expensive meal with her husband. She'd dressed up. She'd made plans. She'd gone somewhere special. Just not with me. That's when something inside me shifted. Not broke, shifted. Like a tectonic plate moving deep beneath the Earth's surface, invisible but catastrophic in its implications. I want you to understand something before I go any further with this story. I need you to know that I'm not someone who seeks revenge lightly. I've spent my entire life being reasonable, being understanding, being the bigger person. I've swallowed my pride more times than I can count. I've forgiven people who didn't deserve forgiveness. I've made excuses for bad behavior because it was easier than confronting the truth. But there's something about being completely forgotten that changes you. There's something about realizing that the person you gave everything to doesn't think you're worth a 3-hour dinner that fundamentally alters your understanding of your own worth. If you're enjoying this story so far, if any of this is resonating with you, please consider subscribing to this channel. There are more stories like this one in the description box below. Stories about people who were pushed too far, who finally stood up for themselves, who refused to be invisible anymore. Hit that subscribe button, because what comes next is going to take you on a journey you won't forget. I set my phone down and I sat in that empty dining room until well past midnight, surrounded by the ruins of my failed party. The balloons were starting to lose their helium, sinking slowly toward the floor. Outside, I could hear the sounds of the city, sirens, voices, the rumble of the subway beneath the street. But inside my apartment, there was only silence and the steady tick of the clock on the wall. Somewhere around 1 in the morning, I made a decision. I didn't know exactly what it would look like yet, didn't have a plan fully formed. But I knew with absolute certainty that I was done being the person everyone took for granted. I was done being the mother who gave and gave and gave without ever receiving anything in return. I was done being invisible. I got up from the table, my legs stiff from sitting for so long, and I walked to my bedroom. I changed out of the navy dress I'd bought for people who never showed up to see it, hanging it carefully in the closet because some habits die hard. I washed my face, removing the makeup I'd applied so carefully that morning, watching my real face emerge in the mirror, older, tired, but not defeated. Never defeated. Before I turned out the light, I picked up my phone one more time. I opened my text messages and I found Emma's name. My thumb hovered over the screen for a long moment. Part of me wanted to send something angry, something that would make her understand exactly how much she'd hurt me. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I simply turned off my phone and went to bed. Because if there's one thing I'd learned in 63 years of life, it's that the most powerful response isn't always the loudest one. Sometimes it's the quietest. Sometimes it's the one they never see coming. And Emma had no idea what was coming. I woke up the next morning with a clarity I hadn't felt in years, and I realized that sometimes you have to hit rock bottom before you understand that you've been digging your own grave for other people to stand on. The sunlight was streaming through my bedroom curtains, harsh and unforgiving, illuminating the dust motes that danced in the air. I lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the wave of sadness to crash over me the way it usually did when I remembered something painful. But it didn't come. Instead, there was just this strange, cold calm, like the eye of a hurricane, where everything goes still right before the worst of the storm hits. I got up and made coffee, the same ritual I'd performed every morning for decades. French roast, 2 sugars, a splash of half and half. I stood at my kitchen window, looking out over the street below, watching the Sunday morning crowd shuffle toward the bagel shop on the corner. Families. Couples. Groups of friends recovering from Saturday night with greasy food and orange juice. Normal people living normal lives, completely unaware that somewhere in the building above them, a woman was planning her revenge. That sounds dramatic, I know. Revenge is such a loaded word, something out of thriller movies and crime novels. But what else do you call it when you decide to stop letting people walk all over you? What else do you call it when you finally stand up and say, no more? My phone was still off from the night before. I'd left it on the charger in my bedroom, and now, standing in my kitchen with my coffee, I felt no urge to turn it back on. Let them wonder. Let them wait. For once in my life, I was going to be the one who was unavailable. I spent that Sunday doing something I hadn't done in months. I took care of myself. I ran a bath with the expensive bath salts I'd bought a year ago but never used because I was always saving them for a special occasion. I painted my nails a deep burgundy color that made me feel powerful. I ordered Thai food for lunch, not because I was celebrating anything, but because I wanted it and I was tired of denying myself small pleasures. And I thought about Emma. I thought about the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, who'd press her face against my shoulder and whisper, "Mommy, I'm scared." I thought about the teenager who'd cried in my arms when her first boyfriend broke her heart, who'd asked me if the pain would ever go away. I thought about the young woman who'd called me from college at 3 in the morning during her first semester, homesick and overwhelmed, saying, "I don't know if I can do this, Mom." And I'd always been there. Always. I'd soothed the fears, mended the broken hearts, talked her through the panic attacks and the self-doubt. I'd been her rock, her safe harbor, her constant in a world that was often cruel and unpredictable. When had that stopped being enough? When had I stopped being a person to her and become just an obligation? An afterthought? A box to check off on her mental to-do list of family responsibilities? I couldn't pinpoint the exact moment. It had been gradual, like erosion. So slow you don't notice until suddenly there's a canyon where solid ground used to be. Maybe it started when she met Brandon. He was a financial analyst, made good money, came from a wealthy family in Connecticut. I'd been happy for her at first. She deserved someone stable, someone who could give her the security I'd never been able to provide consistently. But Brandon had a way of making subtle comments that undermined me. Nothing overtly cruel, nothing I could call him out on without sounding paranoid. Just little things. Like when I'd given them a hammer-down dining table that had been in my family for generations, and he'd said, "Thanks, Patricia, we'll probably donate this to Goodwill once we have room in the budget for something more modern." Or when I'd offered to help them paint their new condo, and he'd laughed and said, "That's sweet, but we're hiring professionals." Emma's mother isn't exactly known for her interior design skills. Emma never defended me during these moments. She'd just smile awkwardly and change the subject, as if my feelings didn't matter enough to warrant a confrontation with her husband. Over time, I'd watched her transform. The woman who emerged from their relationship wasn't the daughter I'd raised. She was harder, more materialistic, more concerned with appearances than with substance. She started talking about investment opportunities and networking events and building their brand. She stopped asking how I was doing and started only calling when she needed something: advice on a recipe, help figuring out her taxes, a loan to cover an unexpected expense. And I'd given. Every time. Because that's what mothers do, right? We give until there's nothing left, and then we find a way to give more. It was nearly 6 o'clock that evening when I finally turned my phone back on. It exploded with notifications, missed calls, text messages, voicemails. My heart rate picked up as I scrolled through them, expecting an avalanche of apologies, explanations, guilt-ridden messages from Emma and everyone else who'd failed to show up. But that's not what I found. There was one text from Judith, sent at noon. "Hey, hope you had a nice birthday yesterday. Sorry we couldn't make it. Something came up with Paul's work thing. Rain check." One text from Janet Holbrook from my book club. "Patricia, we missed you at movie night last night. Next time let us know if you're not coming so we can save the seat." And from Emma? Nothing. Not until I scrolled to the very bottom of my messages and found one text, sent at 9:30 that morning. "Hey Mom, tried calling but you didn't pick up. Hope your birthday was good. Talk soon." Hope your birthday was good. Hope your birthday was good. As if she had no idea whether it was or wasn't. As if she hadn't been the one who was supposed to be there. As if her absence was just an unfortunate circumstance beyond her control, rather than a deliberate choice she'd made. I read that text message 7 times, analyzing every word, every punctuation mark, looking for some hidden layer of meaning that would explain this casual indifference. But there was nothing. Just a perfunctory message from a daughter who'd completely forgotten about her mother. If you've ever been on the receiving end of that kind of emotional neglect, you know exactly how I felt in that moment. You know the way it hollows you out, makes you question whether you've been deluding yourself about the entire relationship. If you're nodding along right now, if you're thinking about someone in your own life who's made you feel this way, I want you to leave a comment and share your story. Because we're not alone in this. And sometimes just knowing that someone else understands can make all the difference. I set the phone down and I walked to my desk, where I kept all my important documents, bank statements, insurance policies, the deed to my apartment. I pulled out a folder labeled Emma, and I opened it. Inside were years of financial records. Copies of checks I'd written to her over the years, bank transfers, receipts for gifts I'd bought, loan agreements I'd drawn up when she needed money for various things. I'd kept meticulous records, not because I'd ever planned to use them against her, but because I'd been trained as a librarian. Organization and documentation were second nature to me. I added up the numbers. Over the past 15 years, since she'd turned 18 and started adulting, as she called it, I'd given Emma over $87,000. Some of it had been gifts, birthday money, Christmas presents, her wedding. But a significant portion had been loans that were never repaid, bailouts from financial troubles of her own making, contributions to expenses that Brandon's salary should have covered but somehow didn't. $87,000. More than my annual salary for each of the last 2 years of my library career. Money I'd scraped together from my modest savings, money I'd earned through freelance editing work that kept me up until 2 in the morning, money that should have been building my retirement fund instead of subsidizing my daughter's lifestyle. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking I'm a fool for giving her that much money. You're thinking I should have set boundaries years ago, should have said no, should have made her stand on her own 2 feet. And you're right. I was a fool. But I was a fool who loved her daughter more than she loved herself, and there's a particular kind of blindness that comes with that type of love. I took out my checkbook and I looked at the balance. After years of working and saving and sacrificing, I had about $43,000 in my checking account and another $120,000 in various retirement accounts that I couldn't touch without penalty. Not rich by any means, but comfortable enough. Enough to live on for a while if I was careful. I thought about what Emma would do if the roles were reversed. If I needed money for something, an emergency, a vacation, a new piece of furniture, would she be there? Would she hand me $5,000 without question? Would she even hand me $500? I knew the answer. And that answer was what finally broke through the last of my denial, the last of my maternal excuses, the last of my desperate hope that my daughter was still the person I'd raised her to be. I spent the rest of that evening doing research. I looked up tenant rights in New York. I looked up the process for changing locks on an apartment you owned. I looked up information about gifts versus loans and what recourse someone had when money wasn't repaid. And I waited. Because I had a feeling, a mother's intuition, maybe, or just a pattern recognition developed over years of being used, that it wouldn't be long before Emma reached out to me. Not to apologize. Not to acknowledge missing my birthday. But to ask for something. She always asked for something. The week passed slowly. I went to my yoga class on Monday, had lunch with a former colleague on Wednesday, spent Friday volunteering at the community center where I helped seniors with computer literacy. I lived my life, took care of my responsibilities, maintained my routines. But underneath it all, I was waiting. Emma didn't call. Didn't text. 6 days went by without a single word from my daughter, and that silence told me everything I needed to know about how little I mattered to her. On Thursday of that week, I did something I'd been avoiding for years. I made an appointment with a therapist. Her name was Dr. Helen Kowalski, and she had an office in a brownstone on the Upper West Side. I'd gotten her name from Janet Holbrook, who'd been seeing her for years and swore she was life-changing. "Tell me why you're here," Dr. Kowalski said in our first session. She was maybe 50, with grey hair she didn't bother to color and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. And I told her everything. The birthday party nobody came to. The years of financial support I'd given Emma. The gradual erosion of our relationship. The Instagram post that had shattered my remaining illusions. Dr. Kowalski listened without interrupting, taking occasional notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, She set down her pen and looked at me for a long moment. Patricia, she said finally, do you know what emotional parentification is? I shook my head. It's when a child becomes responsible for their parents' emotional well-being. But what you're describing is the reverse. You've made your daughter's happiness, her success, her financial stability, your primary purpose in life. You've sacrificed your own needs to meet hers, and in doing so, you've taught her that your needs don't matter, that you exist to serve her. The words hit me like a physical blow. I was just being a good mother. Were you? Or were you being a martyr? I wanted to argue, to defend myself, to explain that she didn't understand the complexity of mother-daughter relationships. But I couldn't. Because somewhere deep down, I knew she was right. The pattern you've established, Dr. Kowalski continued, is not healthy for either of you. You've made it impossible for Emma to see you as a person with your own needs, your own life, your own boundaries. You've positioned yourself as an inexhaustible resource. And when resources become taken for granted, they stop being valued. So what do? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. You set boundaries. You reclaim your identity as a person, not just as a mother. And you accept that Emma might not like it. In fact, she'll probably be angry. People don't like it when their understanding of a relationship suddenly changes, when someone who's always said yes starts saying no. I left that session with my head spinning and my heart aching. But I also left with something I hadn't had before, validation. Someone who understood that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't selfish, that I deserved better than I'd been accepting. It was late Friday afternoon, exactly 1 week after my birthday, when my phone finally buzzed with Emma's name on the screen. I looked at it for a long moment before opening the message. My hands were shaking slightly, and I could feel my heart beating faster. This was it. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. The text read, "Hey Mom, hope you're doing well. Quick question, Brandon and I are planning our annual vacation to the Bahamas next month and we're a bit short on the budget. Could you spot us $5,000? We'll pay you back after his Christmas bonus comes through. Let me know. Love you." I stared at those words until they started to blur. $5,000. Not "I'm sorry I missed your birthday." Not "I feel terrible about last weekend." Just a request for money, framed as a quick question with a heart emoji at the end. I sat down on my couch, still holding my phone, and I felt something crystallize inside me. This was my test. This was the universe giving me an opportunity to either continue the pattern or break it. To either be the martyr Dr. Kowalski had described or to become someone new. My thumbs moved over the keyboard almost without conscious thought. I typed out a response, deleted it, typed another one, deleted that too. I went through a dozen different versions, some angry, some pleading, some explaining in detail exactly why I wouldn't be giving her the money. But in the end, I kept it simple. I opened my banking app and I sent Emma a payment. $1. Exactly $1. And then I typed, "Congrats on the vacation planning. This should help. Good luck with the rest." I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The response came within minutes. My phone rang with Emma's name on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately. Voicemail again. Then a text. "Mom, I think you sent the wrong amount. Can you resend? We need $5,000. I didn't respond. Instead, I stood up, walked to my front door, and I looked at the locks. They were old, the kind that came with the apartment when I'd bought it 20 years ago. I pulled out my phone and I searched for 24-hour locksmith near me. Within 2 hours, my locks were changed. New deadbolts, new doorknob locks, new everything. I had 2 sets of keys made, both for me. I put one on my keychain and one in a safe deposit box at my bank. And then I finally responded to Emma's text. I kept it brief. The amount was correct. Also, I've changed my locks. If you need to visit, please call ahead to schedule a time. We can discuss what happened on my birthday then. I turned off my phone and I poured myself a glass of wine. The good stuff, the bottle I'd been saving for a special occasion that never seemed to come. I sat on my couch in the apartment that was finally, truly mine, with locks that only I had keys to, and I waited. Because I knew what was coming next. I knew my daughter well enough to know that she wouldn't take this lying down. She'd been raised to believe that my resources were her resources, that my home was her home, that my boundaries were optional. She'd never been told no before. Not really. Not in a way that mattered. And I knew, with the same certainty I'd felt the night of my birthday, that this was just the beginning. 3 days later, at 7:45 in the morning, someone started pounding on my door with such force that I thought the frame might splinter. And I learned that the cost of standing up for yourself is sometimes measured in the rage of people who'd grown comfortable with your submission. I was in my bathroom, brushing my teeth, when the banging started. Loud, aggressive, relentless. The kind of knocking that makes your neighbors peek through their peepholes and wonder if they should call the police. "Mom, open this door right now." Emma's voice carried through the thick wood, shrill and furious. "I know you're in there. Open up." I rinsed my mouth slowly, deliberately, watching myself in the mirror. My hand was steady as I set down the toothbrush. Amazing how calm you can be when you've finally made peace with your decisions. "Mom." Another round of violent knocking. "This is ridiculous. Why aren't you answering your phone? Why did you change the locks?" I walked to the door but didn't open it. Through the peephole, I could see Emma's distorted face, red and twisted with anger. Brandon stood slightly behind her, his arms crossed, looking annoyed but not particularly surprised. "Emma," I said through the door, keeping my voice level, "if you don't stop banging on my door, I'm going to call the superintendent. You can come back when you're ready to have a civil conversation." "Civil?" She let out a harsh laugh. "You sent me $1, Mom. $1. And then you changed your locks without telling me? What kind of mother does that?" "The kind who had 12 people not show up to her birthday party," I replied. "Including her only daughter." There was a pause. A long one. I could almost hear her brain working through the implications of my words, trying to find an angle, a way to turn this back on me. "That was over a week ago," she finally said, her tone shifting to something that might have passed for contrition if I hadn't known her so well. "I texted you the next morning. I said we'd talk soon." "You asked if my birthday was good," I said. "You asked as if you had no idea whether it was or wasn't. Because you weren't there, Emma. You were at Rosewood with Brandon, posting pictures on Instagram while I sat alone in my apartment with a table set for 12 people who never came." I heard her exhale, could picture her running her hand through her hair the way she always did when she was frustrated. "Mom, I'm sorry, okay? I should have been there. Things just got crazy with work and Brandon had made these reservations weeks ago and—" "Stop," I interrupted. "Just stop. I'm not doing this through a door. You want to have this conversation. You'll make an appointment like I asked. You'll come over at a time we agree on, and you'll show me the respect you'd show any other person in your life." "Any other person?" Her voice rose again. "I'm your daughter. I shouldn't need an appointment to see my own mother." "You're also someone who hasn't bothered to see her mother in 3 months, I said quietly. "Someone who only calls when she needs money. Someone who forgot her mother's birthday and then had the audacity to ask for $5,000 a week later without even apologizing first." "So this is about the money?" Brandon's voice cut in, smug and knowing. "This is Patricia having one of her martyr moments where she tallies up every penny she's ever spent on you and throws it in your face." Something white-hot flared in my chest at the sound of his voice, at the casual cruelty in his tone. But I kept my voice steady. "This has nothing to do with you, Brandon. This is between me and my daughter." "Except you're affecting both of us with your petty revenge," he shot back. "We budgeted for that vacation based on your past pattern of behavior. You've always helped us when we needed it. Now suddenly you're playing mind games." "Past pattern of behavior?" I couldn't help the bitter laugh that escaped. "You mean me being an ATM for the past 15 years? Yes, I'm changing that pattern. Consider it a life lesson." I heard them whispering to each other, urgent and sharp, the kind of heated exchange that couples have when they're trying to figure out a united strategy. Then Emma's voice again, softer now, pleading. "Mom, please. Can we at least talk about this face to face? I'll apologize properly. We can work this out. But standing out here in the hallway, it's embarrassing. Mrs. Chen from 4B is staring at us." I almost smiled. There was the real Emma, the one who cared more about appearances than substance. She wasn't upset that she'd hurt me. She was upset that we were having this confrontation where the neighbors could hear. "You have my number," I said. "Call me when you're ready to have an actual conversation. Not when you want money. Not when you need something. When you're ready to acknowledge what you did and why it was wrong." This is insane, Brandon muttered. Come on, Em. She's clearly having some kind of breakdown. Let's go. A breakdown. The words were out before I could stop them. I'm having clarity, Brandon. Maybe for the first time in years. And I'm sorry if that's inconvenient for your vacation plans. I walked away from the door, even though they were still standing out there. I could hear Emma calling after me, her voice taking on that whining quality she'd had as a child when she didn't get her way. But I went to my kitchen, put on the kettle for tea, and I waited for the sounds in the hallway to finally stop. When the silence came, it was absolute. They'd left. My daughter and her husband had stood outside my door, demanded entry, insulted me, and then left without getting what they wanted. And I felt powerful. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt like I had control over my own life. That feeling lasted approximately 43 minutes. My phone rang at 8:30. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. Ms. Patricia Brennan. A professional, clipped voice. Female. Yes. This is Officer Lisa Warren with the NYPD. I'm calling regarding a wellness check request we received for your address. Your daughter Emma called our non-emergency line expressing concern about your mental state. She says you've been acting erratically, changed your locks without explanation, and sent her threatening messages. My blood went cold. Threatening messages. That's what she reported. She's concerned you may be having some kind of mental health crisis. I'm calling to verify that you're safe and to determine if we need to send officers to your location for a welfare check. I closed my eyes, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles went white. Of course. Of course Emma would do this. When reason failed, when manipulation failed, she'd escalate. She'd turn me into a problem that required official intervention. Officer Warren, I said, forcing my voice to remain calm, I am perfectly fine. I am 63 years old, of sound mind, and I have not sent anyone threatening messages. My daughter and I had a disagreement, and I set some boundaries she didn't like. That's all. Can you tell me what the disagreement was about? She missed my birthday party and then asked me for $5,000. I declined to give her the money and changed my locks because she has a history of letting herself into my apartment without permission. That's my right as the homeowner. There was a pause. I could hear keyboard clicking in the background. Your daughter mentioned the dollar you sent her with a message she interpreted as hostile. I sent her $1 and said congratulations on her vacation planning. If that's hostile, then I think the issue is with her interpretation, not my intent. More clicking. Then Officer Warren's voice, slightly softer. Ms. Brennan, I'm going to be honest with you. This sounds like a family dispute, not a wellness concern. But I do need to file a report since a call was made. Would you be comfortable with officers stopping by your residence briefly just to verify everything is okay? It would close out the report and prevent any further concerns. And if I refuse? That's your right. But I should tell you that your daughter was quite insistent. She's threatened to pursue an emergency mental health evaluation if we don't follow up. I felt my jaw clench so hard my teeth ached. An emergency mental health evaluation. Emma was threatening to have me involuntarily committed because I'd refused to give her money. When would the officers arrive? I asked. Within the next hour. It would be 2 officers, just a brief conversation. 5 minutes, maximum. I weighed my options. If I refused, it would look suspicious, would give Emma ammunition to claim I really was having some kind of breakdown. If I agreed, I'd be submitting to this humiliation, this invasion of my privacy orchestrated by my own daughter. But I'd also be able to set the record straight with law enforcement, to document that I was perfectly competent and that this was harassment. Fine, I said. Send them. I'll be here. Thank you for your cooperation, Ms. Brennan. Officers Ramirez and Chen will be there shortly. I hung up and I sat down on my couch, my whole body trembling with an emotion I couldn't quite name. It was beyond anger, beyond hurt. It was a kind of grief, the mourning of the daughter I'd thought I had, the relationship I'd believed we shared. Emma had called the police on me, her own mother, because I'd said no. I looked around my apartment, suddenly seeing it through the eyes of police officers who'd been told to check on my mental state. Was it too cluttered? Too sparse? Would they see an unstable woman or just someone who lived alone and liked her space a certain way? I did a quick walkthrough anyway, straightening pillows, putting away the breakfast dishes I'd left in the sink. Not because I thought I needed to prove anything, but because it gave me something to do with my hands, some way to channel the nervous energy coursing through me. The knock came 45 minutes later. Polite, professional, nothing like Emma's aggressive pounding. I checked the peephole and saw 2 uniformed officers, one male, one female, both young, probably in their late 20s. I opened the door with a smile that felt like it might crack my face. "Miss Brennan?" the female officer asked. She had kind eyes, I noticed. That helped. "That's me. Please, come in." They stepped inside, their eyes doing that quick professional scan that police officers do, looking for weapons, signs of danger, evidence of instability. I watched them take in my tidy apartment, the books on the shelves, the photos on the wall, the normalcy of everything. "I'm Officer Ramirez," the woman said, "and this is Officer Chen. We're here following up on a welfare check request from your daughter. How are you doing today, "I'm doing well, thank you. Though I'm disappointed that my daughter felt this was necessary." Officer Chen pulled out a small notebook. "Can you tell us what happened between you and your daughter recently?" I took a breath and I told them everything. Not emotionally, not with the rage I felt bubbling beneath the surface, but factually. The birthday party no one attended. The Instagram posts proving Emma had made other plans. The request for money 1 week later with no apology. My response. The changed locks. The confrontation outside my door this morning. "She stood in my hallway and screamed at me," I said quietly, "because I wouldn't give her $5,000. And when that didn't work, she called you and said I was having a mental health crisis." Officer Ramirez and Officer Chen exchanged a look. It was quick, but I caught it, that subtle communication between partners who've worked together long enough to have their own language. "Ms. Brennan," Officer Ramirez said carefully, "you seem perfectly lucid and rational to me. Are you taking any medications we should be aware of? Any history of mental health issues?" "None. I take a low-dose blood pressure medication, that's it. I'm retired from the New York Public Library where I worked for 30 years. I volunteer at the community center. I see a therapist now, started just last week, actually, to help me process some family relationship issues. But there's nothing wrong with my mental state." "And the text message? The one with the dollar?" I pulled out my phone and showed them the entire text exchange. Emma's request for money. My response. Her follow-up demands. My final message about the locks. Officer Chen actually smiled a little as he read it. "I don't see anything threatening here." "Neither do I said. "What I see is my daughter manipulating the system because she didn't get what she wanted." Officer Ramirez nodded slowly. "Ms. Brennan, I'm going to be straight with you. This is clearly a family dispute, not a mental health crisis. We're going to document that we found you safe, sound, and completely competent. However," she paused, choosing her words carefully, "you should know that your daughter could continue to escalate this. If she does, you might want to consider getting ahead of it." "What do you mean?" "Document everything. Keep records of all communications. If she shows up here again and causes a disturbance, call us. Don't engage with her through the door. That can be twisted into something it's not. And maybe talk to your therapist about whether you need to involve a lawyer." The word lawyer hit me like a punch. This was my daughter. My child. The person I'd grown inside my body, nursed through illnesses, protected from every harm I could. And now I needed legal protection from her? "I understand," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "One more thing," Officer Chen added. "Does your daughter have any belongings here? Anything she could claim she needs to retrieve?" I thought about it. There was an old box in the back of my closet with some of Emma's childhood things, her baby book, some art projects from elementary school, a few stuffed animals. Nothing essential, nothing she'd asked about in years. "Some childhood memorabilia in storage," I said. "Nothing she needs immediate access to." Good. Because if she shows up claiming she needs to get her things, that could be a pretext to gain entry. If she asks for anything, you can offer to mail it to her or meet her somewhere neutral to hand it over. You're not obligated to let her into your home. They stayed for another 10 minutes, asking routine questions, taking notes, being surprisingly compassionate about the whole situation. When they left, Officer Ramirez handed me her card. "If your daughter shows up again and refuses to leave, call me directly," she said. "We'll have this report on file, and it'll establish a pattern if she continues to harass you. Harass. The word echoed in my mind long after they'd gone. I sat down at my dining table, the same table where I'd waited alone on my birthday, and I felt something shift inside me again. Not the cold clarity from before, but something harder. Something sharper. Emma had tried to have me declared mentally incompetent. She'd weaponized the police against me. She'd escalated a simple boundary into a full-scale war, all because I'd refused to fund her vacation. If you're watching this and you've ever had someone in your life turn on you like this, someone you loved, someone you trusted, someone you would have done anything for, then you understand the particular kind of betrayal I'm describing. It's not just the anger at what they did. It's the grief of realizing who they actually are versus who you'd believe them to be. Drop a comment below and share your story, because I promise you're not alone. And please check the description box for more stories like this one, stories about people who fought back when they were pushed too far. I made a list that afternoon. A detailed, methodical list of every time I'd helped Emma financially over the past 15 years. I pulled out tax returns, bank statements, cancelled checks, email confirmations of wire transfers. I created a spreadsheet with dates, amounts, and purposes for each transaction. The total came to $87,342. I printed out the spreadsheet, made copies, and put them in a folder labeled Emma, Financial History. Then I put that folder in my safe deposit box at the bank, along with screenshots of the text messages from this week, copies of the police report Officer Ramirez said I could request, and a detailed written account of the birthday party and everything that had happened since. I didn't know if I'd ever need these documents. But I was done being unprepared. I was done being the naive mother who assumed her daughter would never hurt her. That night, as I was getting ready for bed, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. Ms. Brennan, this is Jennifer Chen, Emma's friend from college. Emma asked me to reach out to you. She's really upset about everything that's happened. She's crying and can't sleep, and Brandon says she's not eating. I know there's two sides to every story, but Emma's mental health is really suffering. Whatever happened between you two, is it really worth destroying your relationship with your daughter? Family is everything. Maybe you could just apologize and move past this. I'm sure she'd be willing to forgive you. I read that message 3 times, feeling my blood pressure rise with each reading. Emma had sent in reinforcements. A friend I'd met maybe twice in my life, who knew nothing about the actual situation, was telling me to apologize. For what? For refusing to be a doormat? For setting boundaries? For expecting basic respect and consideration? I started typing a response, deleted it, started again. In the end, I kept it simple. Jennifer, I appreciate your concern for Emma, but you don't have all the facts. This is between me and my daughter, and I'm not going to discuss it with her friends. Please don't contact me about this again. I blocked the number immediately after sending it. Over the next 3 days, I received similar messages from 4 other people. 2 of Emma's friends, Brandon's sister, and someone who claimed to be Emma's therapist, though I was pretty sure that was illegal and probably another lie. Each message painted me as the villain, the unstable mother having a breakdown, the unreasonable woman destroying her family over petty grudges. I blocked each number and documented each message. I was building a case, though I wasn't entirely sure what for. Self-protection? Evidence of harassment? Or just proof to myself that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't overreacting, that what was happening to me was real and wrong? On the 4th day after the police visit, I received a letter. Not an email or a text, but an actual physical letter delivered by certified mail that required my signature. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a formal letter from an attorney named Michael Whitmore, representing Emma and Brandon Castellano. The letter informed me that I was being accused of financial elder abuse for sending Emma threatening communications and withholding funds that had been promised for essential family expenses. It demanded that I immediately cease contact with Emma unless supervised by a mediator, that I return all keys to Emma's condo, keys I didn't have and had never had, and that I enter into family counseling to address my controlling and manipulative behaviors. The letter concluded with a threat: if I didn't comply within 10 days, they would pursue a restraining order against me and explore options for having my financial competency legally evaluated. I sat on my couch holding that letter, reading it over and over until the words stopped making sense. My daughter, my Emma, was accusing me of elder abuse. Was threatening to have my finances put under some kind of supervision. Was painting me as a danger to her. I'd given her everything. Everything. And this was how she repaid me. I picked up my phone and I called the one person I probably should have called days ago. My sister, Judith. She answered on the third ring, her voice cheerful and oblivious. Patricia. I've been meaning to call you back. How are you? Judith, I said, my voice surprisingly steady, I need your help. Something's happened with Emma, and I need to talk to someone who knows both of us. Can you meet me for coffee? There was a pause. Then, more carefully, Emma called me yesterday. She's really worried about you, Patricia. She says you're not acting like yourself. And there it was. Emma had gotten to Judith first, had poisoned that well too. Did she tell you she missed my birthday party and then asked me for $5,000 a week later? I asked quietly. Another pause. She said there was a miscommunication about the party, and that the money was a loan you'd agreed to before. Both of those things are lies, Judith. And I can prove it. But I need to know, are you going to believe your sister, or are you going to believe your niece who's already gotten to you with her version of events? I could hear Judith breathing on the other end of the line. I could picture her face, the way it looked when she was torn between loyalties, between comfort and truth. Come to my house, she said finally. Tomorrow afternoon. We'll talk about this properly. It wasn't the immediate, unquestioning support I'd hoped for. But it was something. I hung up and I looked down at the letter from Emma's attorney still clutched in my hand. The paper was expensive, the letterhead embossed. They'd spent money on this. They'd gone to a lawyer, paid for a consultation, paid for this letter to be drafted and sent certified mail. All because I'd said no. I thought about the little girl who used to climb into my lap and ask me to read her the same story over and over. Again, Mommy, she'd say. Read it again. And I always did. I always gave her what she wanted. Maybe that was the problem. Maybe I'd spent so many years giving her everything she wanted that I'd never taught her how to handle not getting it. But that little girl was gone. In her place was a woman who'd weaponized the legal system, who'd tried to have me declared mentally incompetent, who'd sent friends to guilt me into submission. A woman I barely recognized. I folded the letter carefully and put it in my growing evidence file. Then I did something I'd been avoiding, something that felt like admitting defeat but was actually the smartest thing I could do. I called a lawyer of my own. The law office of Rebecca Torres was located in a sleek building in Midtown, all glass and steel and the kind of polished professionalism that costs $350 an hour, and I realized that protecting yourself from the people who are supposed to love you is the most expensive kind of self-defense there is. Rebecca was in her early 40s, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, with dark hair pulled back in a severe bun that somehow made her look both intimidating and trustworthy. Her office walls were covered with diplomas and certificates, Columbia Law, various bar admissions, awards from family law associations. Ms. Brennan, she said, gesturing to a leather chair across from her desk, tell me everything from the beginning. Don't leave anything out, even if you think it's not important. So I did. I told her about the birthday party, about the money I'd given Emma over the years, about the $1 payment and the changed locks. I told her about the police welfare check, the certified letter from Emma's attorney, the flying monkeys sent to guilt me into submission. Rebecca listened without interrupting, her pen moving steadily across a legal pad. When I finished, she set down her pen and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Do you have documentation of the financial support you've given your daughter? I pulled out my folder and slid it across the desk. 15 years worth. $87,000. Rebecca's eyebrows rose slightly as she flipped through the pages. This is comprehensive. Most people don't keep records like this. I'm a librarian, I said with a shrug. Documentation is in my DNA. Well, your DNA is about to save you a lot of trouble. She pulled out the letter from Emma's attorney and read it carefully. This is mostly bluster. Financial elder abuse is a serious accusation, but it requires proof that someone in a position of trust exploited your resources for their benefit. What's happening here is exactly the opposite. You stopped giving your adult daughter money, and she's retaliating. Can they really get a restraining order against me? They can try. But based on what you've told me and what I see here, they don't have grounds. You haven't threatened her, you haven't harassed her, you haven't done anything except set reasonable boundaries. Rebecca leaned back in her chair. Here's what's actually happening. Your daughter and her husband are trying to intimidate you into backing down. They're using legal language to scare you because they've probably never had you stand up to them before. The question is, how far are you willing to let this go? What do you mean? I mean, this could escalate. If they actually file for a restraining order, you'll have to go to court. If they pursue the financial competency evaluation, you'll need to submit to psychiatric testing. These things are public record. They're messy and expensive and emotionally exhausting. Some parents, when faced with that possibility, choose to just give in. To apologize, give the money, maintain the peace. I thought about Officer Ramirez's card in my wallet. I thought about the spreadsheet documenting $87,000 of one-way generosity. I thought about sitting alone at my birthday table while my daughter ate expensive food at a restaurant I couldn't afford. I'm not giving in, I said. Not this time. Rebecca smiled, a small, satisfied smile that told me this was the answer she'd hoped to hear. Good. Then here's what we're going to do. She outlined a strategy. First, we'd respond to the letter from Emma's attorney with our own letter, refuting each accusation point by point and providing documentation to support my version of events. Second, we'd file a preemptive motion establishing that I was of sound mind and under no legal obligation to financially support my adult daughter. Third, we'd document any further harassment and prepare for the possibility of seeking our own restraining order if Emma's behavior continued to escalate. This is going to cost money, Rebecca warned. Family law disputes can drain resources quickly, especially when emotions are running high. Are you prepared for that? I thought about my bank account, my retirement savings, the comfortable life I'd built for myself through decades of hard work. I thought about how much of that money I'd already given away to someone who now wanted to paint me as abusive for finally saying enough. Yes, I said. I'm prepared. We spent another hour going over details, strategy, potential outcomes. When I finally left Rebecca's office, it was dark outside and my head was spinning with legal terminology and worst-case scenarios. But I also felt something I hadn't felt in weeks: hope. Professional validation. Confirmation that I wasn't crazy or cruel or the villain Emma was trying to make me out to be. I took the subway home, watching the other passengers and wondering if any of them were dealing with similar betrayals. The tired woman in the nurse's scrubs, did she have ungrateful children? The elderly man with the cane, had his family abandoned him? We all sat there in our private hells, pretending everything was fine, because that's what you do in a city of 8 million people who don't want to see your pain. When I got home, there was a note taped to my door. Not from Emma, from Mrs. Chen, my neighbor from 4B. Patricia, your daughter came by again today around 3 p.m. She was crying in the hallway and asked me if I had a spare key to your apartment. I told her I didn't. She waited outside your door for over an hour. I thought you should know. Margaret Chen. I crumpled the note in my fist, anger and guilt warring inside me. Part of me wanted to feel bad that Emma had been crying, that she'd waited for me, that she was suffering. But the larger part, the part that was finally learning to protect myself, recognized this for what it was: manipulation. Theater. A performance designed to recruit my neighbors to her cause, to make me look like the heartless mother who wouldn't even open her door for her own distressed daughter. I went inside and I locked the new locks behind me. Then I sat down and I wrote an email to all my neighbors, the ones whose email addresses I'd collected over the years for building management communications. Dear neighbors, I wanted to make you aware of a difficult family situation. My daughter and I are currently in a dispute, and she may attempt to gain access to my apartment or recruit your help in reaching me. I ask that you please respect my privacy and do not give out any information about me, my schedule, or provide her with any means of entering my home. If she approaches you, please politely decline to get involved. This is a private family matter being handled through appropriate legal channels. Thank you for your understanding. Patricia Brennan, 5A. It felt cold. It felt like a betrayal of the mother I'd always tried to be. But it was necessary. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The response from my neighbors was swift and almost universally supportive. Mrs. Chen wrote back immediately, "Of course, Patricia. I'm so sorry you're dealing with this. Your privacy will be respected." Others chimed in with similar messages. Mr. Reyes from 3C, "Families can be tough. You do what you need to do." Janet from 2B, "Been there with my own son. Stay strong." Their kindness made me cry, the first tears I'd shed through this entire ordeal. Not sad tears, exactly, but tears of gratitude that there were still people in the world who understood that boundaries weren't cruelty, that self-protection wasn't selfishness. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Emma as a child, about all the moments when I taught her right from wrong, when I tried to instill values of kindness and gratitude and respect. Where had I gone wrong? What crucial lesson had I failed to teach that had resulted in this person who thought it was acceptable to call the police on her mother for setting boundaries? Or maybe I taught her exactly what I'd modeled, that her needs mattered more than anyone else's, that she was entitled to whatever she wanted, that the word no didn't apply to her. I got up at 2 in the morning and I wrote in my journal, something Dr. Kowalski had suggested. I wrote pages and pages about my relationship with Emma, trying to identify the turning points, the moments when things had shifted. And a pattern emerged that I'd never consciously recognized before. Every time Emma had faced a natural consequence for her actions, I'd swooped in to rescue her. Forgot to study for a test? I'd convinced the teacher to let her retake it. Got fired from a job for chronic lateness? I'd paid her rent until she found something else. Made poor financial decisions? I'd covered her mistakes with my own money. I'd taught her that there were no real consequences. That no matter what she did, Mom would fix it. Mom would bail her out. Mom would sacrifice to make sure Emma never had to struggle. And now, when I'd finally stopped playing that role, when I'd finally let her face the consequences of her own choices, she'd lashed out like a wild animal caught in a trap. The realization was devastating and liberating in equal measure. Over the next few days, life took on a surreal quality. On the surface, everything was normal. I went to my yoga class, had lunch with old friends, continued my volunteer work. But underneath, I was constantly braced for the next attack, the next escalation in Emma's campaign against me. It came on Thursday afternoon in the form of a phone call from my bank. Ms. Brennan? This is David Winters from Fraud Prevention. We've received a concerning claim about your account and I need to verify some information with you. My stomach dropped. What kind of claim? A woman identifying herself as your daughter has contacted us claiming that you're not competent to manage your own finances and that she needs to be added as a co-signer on your accounts for your own protection. She's submitted some kind of medical documentation suggesting cognitive decline. I felt the room tilt. What? I haven't seen a doctor about cognitive decline. I don't have cognitive decline. I understand. That's why I'm calling. We take these claims very seriously, but we also don't make changes to accounts without thorough verification. I need to ask you some questions to confirm your identity and mental capacity. He proceeded to ask me a series of questions: my account numbers, recent transactions, my mother's maiden name, the name of my first pet. I answered each one correctly, my voice shaking with rage and fear. Ms. Brennan, you're clearly lucid and in full control of your faculties. I'm going to document this call and flag your account so that no changes can be made without your explicit consent in person with 2 forms of ID. I'm also going to need you to come into the branch and fill out some additional security paperwork. What documentation did my daughter submit? I asked. I can't give you specifics over the phone, but I can tell you it appeared to be a letter from a medical professional. However, it wasn't on official letterhead and didn't include proper licensing information. To be frank, it looked fake. Emma had forged medical documents. My daughter had created fraudulent paperwork and submitted it to my bank in an attempt to gain control of my finances. Thank you for catching this, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I'll be there tomorrow morning. I hung up and immediately called Rebecca Torres. She answered on the second ring. Rebecca, Emma just tried to take over my bank accounts. She submitted fake medical documents claiming I have cognitive decline. There was a pause. Then Rebecca's voice, tight and professional. That's bank fraud. That's a crime. Did they give you copies of the documents? No, but they said I could get them when I go in tomorrow. Get them. Get everything. This just escalated from a family dispute to potential criminal activity. She paused again. Patricia, I have to ask, how far do you want to take this? Because if we report this to the police, there could be charges. Your daughter could face legal consequences. I closed my eyes. This was it. This was the moment where I had to decide if I was really willing to let my daughter face the results of her own actions, even if those results were criminal charges. I thought about the birthday party, the fake concern, the police welfare check, the attorney's letter, and now this, attempting to fraudulently gain access to my financial accounts. Document everything, I said. We'll decide about criminal charges after we have all the facts. But I'm not protecting her from this anymore. If you're still watching this, if you've made it this far through my story, then you know what it's like to reach that breaking point where protection becomes enabling and love becomes self-destruction. Leave a comment below. Tell me if you think I'm doing the right thing. Tell me if you've ever had to make a choice like this. And check the description box below for more stories about people who had to choose between family loyalty and self-preservation. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake imagining worst-case scenarios, playing out conversations with Emma that would never happen, grieving for the relationship we'd once had, or maybe grieving for the relationship I'd believed we had, which might have been an illusion all along. The next morning, I went to the bank. David Winters met me in a private office, and he showed me the documents Emma had submitted. They were on fake letterhead claiming to be from Dr. Sarah Mitchell, neuropsychologist, a person who didn't exist, according to a quick Google search I did right there in the office. The letter stated that I had progressive dementia and was no longer capable of managing complex financial decisions, and that my daughter should be granted power of attorney for my own safety. I stared at those words, progressive dementia, and I felt something inside me die. Not my love for Emma, exactly, but my illusions about who she was. My hope that underneath all this cruelty was still my little girl who'd once made me Mother's Day cards with crayon hearts and glitter. That little girl was gone. Maybe she'd never really existed. I want copies of everything, I told David. And I want it documented in my file that my daughter is not authorized to access any information about my accounts or make any changes under any circumstances. He nodded, printing out copies and adding multiple security flags to my account. As I left the bank with the fraudulent documents in my purse, I felt strangely calm. Emma had made a mistake. A big, criminal, documented mistake. And for once, I wasn't going to fix it for her. I went straight to Rebecca's office. She examined the documents with the cool, analytical gaze of someone who'd seen every kind of family betrayal imaginable. "This is felony fraud," she said finally. "Bank fraud, forgery, attempted financial exploitation of a senior. The DA's office would definitely prosecute this if we reported it." "What happens if we don't report it?" "We use it as leverage. We let Emma and her attorney know that we have evidence of criminal activity, and that if they continue to harass you, if they file any more false claims or pursue any legal action against you, we'll turn this over to law enforcement." "That feels like blackmail," I said quietly. Rebecca shook her head. "It's not blackmail. It's informing someone that their illegal actions have consequences and offering them a chance to back down before those consequences become official. Think of it as giving your daughter one final opportunity to walk away before this ruins her life. One final opportunity. One last chance. How many of those had I given Emma over the years? How many times had I let her slide, made excuses, protected her from the natural results of her own poor choices? But this was different. This wasn't me enabling her. This was me offering her a way out of a situation she'd created entirely on her own. "Do it," I said. "Send the letter." Rebecca drafted a response to Emma's attorney that was a masterpiece of controlled fury. It refuted every accusation in their original letter, provided documentation of my financial support over the years, included statements from the police officers who'd conducted the welfare check confirming my mental competence, and, at the end, mentioned recently discovered evidence of attempted bank fraud that we were currently evaluating whether to report to appropriate authorities. The letter concluded with a simple statement: "Further legal action against Ms. Brennan will result in immediate criminal referrals and counterclaims for harassment. We strongly advise your clients to cease all contact with Ms. Brennan and move forward with their lives." We sent it certified mail, just like they had. Two could play at that game. The response came faster than I'd expected. 3 days after Rebecca sent the letter, I received a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Mom." Emma's voice was small, shaky, nothing like the aggressive woman who'd pounded on my door. "Mom, please, can we talk?" Every maternal instinct I'd spent 63 years developing screamed at me to comfort her, to reassure her, to fix whatever was wrong. But I'd learned my lesson. This was manipulation, not genuine remorse. "Emma, my attorney advised me not to speak with you directly. Anything you need to say should go through Rebecca Torres." "Mom, please." Her voice broke on a sob. "They're saying I could go to jail." "Over what?" "Over asking my own mother for money. How is that fair?" "You didn't just ask for money, Emma. You called the police and tried to have me declared mentally incompetent. You sent friends to harass me. You tried to take over my bank accounts with forged medical documents. That's not asking for money. That's a sustained campaign of harassment and fraud. I was desperate. You don't understand. Brandon lost his job 3 months ago. We've been draining our savings. We needed that $5,000 for bills, not a vacation. I lied about the vacation because I was embarrassed. I felt my resolve waver for just a moment. Brandon lost his job. That was new information. But then I remembered, Emma had been posting pictures of expensive restaurants, new clothes, Broadway shows. If they were really struggling financially, those posts told a different story. If Brandon lost his job 3 months ago, that was 3 months before my birthday. Before you blew off my party to go to Rosewood. Before you asked me for money without even apologizing for standing me up. If you'd come to me honestly, if you'd said, "Mom, we're in trouble and we need help," I might have responded differently. But you didn't. You've never been honest with me, Emma. You've only ever told me what you thought would get you what you wanted. That's not fair. I was trying to protect you from worry. No, I said quietly, you were trying to manipulate me. There's a difference. There was silence on the line. Then Emma's voice, harder now, the tears gone. So that's it? You're really going to press charges against your own daughter? You're going to send me to jail? I haven't decided what I'm going to do. That depends entirely on what you do next. What I do next? What about what you've done? You humiliated me, Mom. You sent me $1 like I'm some kind of joke. You changed the locks on me like I'm a stranger. You turned the police against me. You turned the neighbors against me. I set boundaries, I interrupted. That's all. I said no to giving you money, and I secured my own home. Everything that happened after that, the police, the attorneys, the bank fraud, that was all you, Emma. You did this to yourself. I'm your daughter, she screamed. Doesn't that mean anything to you? And there it was. The question I'd been asking myself for weeks. Did it mean anything? Did our biological connection obligate me to submit to abuse, to fund her lifestyle, to accept disrespect and manipulation? You're my daughter, I said slowly, but that doesn't give you the right to treat me however you want. That doesn't mean I have to accept being forgotten, dismissed, and exploited. Being family doesn't mean unconditional submission, Emma. It means mutual respect. And you haven't shown me any. So you're choosing yourself over me. The accusation hung in the air between us, heavy with years of unspoken resentment. No, I said finally. I'm choosing both of us. I'm choosing to break a pattern that wasn't healthy for either of us. I'm choosing to show you, maybe for the first time in your life, that actions have consequences. Even yours. She hung up without another word. I sat there holding my phone, my hand trembling, tears finally streaming down my face. Not tears of regret, but tears of grief. I was mourning my daughter while she was still alive, mourning a relationship that had maybe always been one-sided, mourning the mother I'd been and the daughter I'd believed Emma could be. But underneath the grief was something solid, something unshakable. For the first time in my life, I'd chosen myself. And I wasn't going to apologize for it. 2 weeks passed without a word from Emma, and I learned that the absence of conflict isn't the same as peace. Sometimes it's just the quiet before someone decides whether to retreat or reload. The silence was strange. I'd grown so accustomed to the constant tension, the waiting for the next phone call or legal threat or surprise visit, that the sudden cessation of hostilities left me feeling unmoored. I caught myself checking my phone compulsively, looking over my shoulder when I left my apartment, startling at unexpected sounds in the hallway. Dr. Kowalski called it hypervigilance during our weekly session. You've been living in fight-or-flight mode for weeks, she explained. Your nervous system doesn't know how to relax yet. It's waiting for the next attack. Do you think it's over? I asked her. Do you think Emma's actually backed down? Dr. Kowalski folded her hands in her lap, her expression thoughtful. I think Emma has been confronted with consequences for the first time in her adult life, and she's trying to figure out her next move. People like her, people who've never had to face the results of their own actions, tend to respond in one of two ways. Either they reflect, mature, and change their behavior, or they double down and escalate. Which one do you think Emma will choose? I think you already know the answer to that question, Patricia. Otherwise you wouldn't still be sleeping with your phone next to your bed and jumping at every noise in the hallway. She was right. I did know. Emma wasn't the reflecting type. She was the type who'd burned through 3 different therapists in college because they kept trying to blame her for everything. The type who'd quit jobs when managers gave her constructive criticism. The type who'd cut off friends who dared to call her out on bad behavior. My daughter didn't do accountability. She did rage and retaliation and self-righteous indignation. So I waited. And I prepared. I spent those 2 weeks fortifying every aspect of my life. I changed my phone number and gave the new one only to people I trusted absolutely. Judith, a handful of close friends, Dr. Kowalski, Rebecca Torres. I set up additional security measures with my bank, requiring in-person verification for any account changes. I installed a security camera outside my apartment door, one of those doorbell cameras that records footage to the cloud. I even updated my will, not because I thought Emma would try to harm me physically, but because I wanted it explicitly documented that my estate would be divided between several charities I cared about, with only a small portion going to Emma, and only if I died of natural causes after the age of 80. Rebecca had raised her eyebrows at that last provision. You're really concerned about foul play? I'm concerned about removing any financial incentive for my daughter to wish me dead, I'd replied flatly. Is that paranoid? In normal circumstances, yes. In your circumstances? It's called being thorough. I also did something I'd been putting off for years. I started building a life that didn't revolve around Emma. I joined a watercolor painting class at the community center. I started attending a book club that actually met regularly instead of canceling half the time. I reconnected with old colleagues from the library, people I'd lost touch with because I'd always been too busy catering to Emma's needs and crises. And slowly, surprisingly, I started to enjoy my life. There were whole days when I didn't think about Emma at all. Days when I woke up excited about my painting class or lunch with Judith or the new novel I was reading. Days when I felt like Patricia Brennan the person, not Patricia Brennan the mother, the ATM, the emotional support system for an ungrateful adult child. Judith had been surprisingly supportive once I'd sat down with her and showed her all the documentation. She'd read through the spreadsheets, the text messages, the police reports, the fraudulent bank documents, and her face had gone through a series of expressions: shock, disbelief, anger, and finally sadness. I had no idea, she'd said quietly. Emma always made it sound like you were the difficult one. Like you were controlling and manipulative and she was just trying to live her own life. That's the story she tells herself, I'd replied. It's easier than admitting she's been using me for years. I'm sorry I didn't believe you at first. When she called me after your birthday, she was crying so hard. She said you'd had some kind of breakdown, that you were saying terrible things to her, that she was worried about your mental health. I should have called you directly instead of just accepting her version. She's very convincing, I'd said. She's had a lifetime of practice. Judith had squeezed my hand across the table. Well, she's not getting away with it anymore. If she tries to rope me into this again, I'm going to tell her exactly what I think of her behavior. Having Judith's support meant more than I could express. It meant I wasn't alone. It meant I wasn't crazy. It meant someone in my family actually saw me as a person worth defending. But as week 2 of the silence stretched into week 3, I started to wonder if maybe, just maybe, Emma had actually learned something. Maybe the threat of criminal charges had been the wake-up call she needed. Maybe she was off somewhere doing her own therapy, her own reflection, her own growth. I allowed myself to hope. Just a little. That hope died on a Wednesday afternoon when Judith called me, her voice tight with anger. Patricia, you need to know what Emma's doing. She's posted something on Facebook. Something terrible. My stomach clenched. What kind of something? A long post about elder abuse. About children who have to protect their parents from their own worst impulses. About the heartbreak of watching dementia steal your mother away. She doesn't name you directly, but anyone who knows your family will know exactly who she's talking about. I hung up with Judith and immediately opened Facebook, something I'd been avoiding for weeks. I found Emma's profile, and there it was, a post from that morning, already with over 200 reactions and 60+ comments. It's been the hardest few weeks of my life, Emma had written. Watching my mother deteriorate has been heartbreaking beyond words. She's always been my rock, my everything, the strongest woman I know. But lately she's changed. She's become paranoid, accusing me of things I never did, pushing away everyone who loves her. She's making dangerous financial decisions and refusing to get the help she needs. I've tried everything, reaching out to her friends, consulting with medical professionals, even involving authorities for wellness checks. But she's convinced everyone is against her. She's cut me off completely, changed her locks, told neighbors not to talk to me. The mother I knew would never do these things. Elder abuse isn't just physical. It's also when we fail to help our aging parents get the medical care they need, when we enable their decline by pretending everything is fine. I refuse to do that. I refuse to watch my mother suffer because she's too proud or too confused to accept help. If you have elderly parents, please watch for the signs. Memory loss, personality changes, paranoia, poor judgment. Dementia is a thief, and it steals the people we love one piece at a time. Don't wait until it's too late. I'm sharing this not for sympathy but for awareness. And because I'm hoping that someone in my mom's life will see this and understand what's really happening. Maybe someone she still trusts can convince her to get evaluated, to get treatment, to let the people who love her help her before it's too late. I love you, Mom, even if you don't believe that right now. I'm not giving up on you. Red Heart Hash. I read that post 3 times, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. It was masterful in its manipulation. She'd painted herself as the devoted daughter trying to save her declining mother. She'd made me sound like a dementia patient in denial. She'd positioned any boundaries I'd set or evidence I'd gathered as symptoms of cognitive decline and paranoia. And people were eating it up. The comments were full of sympathy and support for Emma. Stay strong, sweetie. This must be so hard for you. My mother went through something similar. It's devastating to watch. Sending prayers. You're doing the right thing. Sometimes we have to save our parents from themselves. Have you considered getting guardianship? It might be the only way to protect her. That last comment made my blood run cold. Guardianship. Legal control over my life, my finances, my medical decisions. Emma wasn't just smearing me on social media, she was potentially building a public record to support a future guardianship petition. I took screenshots of everything, the post, the comments, the timestamp. Then I called Rebecca Torres. She's escalating again, I said without preamble. Public defamation this time, disguised as concern. And people are suggesting she pursue guardianship. Rebecca was quiet for a moment. Forward me everything. Screenshots, links, all of it. This is exactly the kind of malicious behavior that supports a harassment case. Is that what we're doing now? A harassment case? Patricia, at some point you're going to have to decide whether you want to play defense forever or go on offense. She's not stopping. She's just changing tactics. Every time you block one avenue of attack, she finds another. The question is, how much more of this are you willing to endure? I thought about Emma as a toddler, the way she'd throw tantrums that would last for hours if she didn't get what she wanted. I thought about Emma as a teenager, the way she'd give me the silent treatment for days if I enforced a punishment. I thought about Emma as an adult, calling the police and forging documents and now publicly accusing me of dementia. She'd never learned to handle no. And she never would unless someone made her. I want to file a restraining order, I said. And I want to report the bank fraud to the police. I'm done playing defense. Are you sure? Once we do this, there's no going back. Your relationship with Emma will probably be permanently damaged. I almost laughed. Rebecca, my relationship with Emma is already gone. I'm just finally accepting that. What I want now is to protect myself from her. And maybe, just maybe, to force her to face real consequences for once in her life. Okay, Rebecca said, her voice warm with approval. Let's do this right. Over the next few days, we built a comprehensive case. We compiled every text message, every email, every piece of documentation. The police reports from the wellness check. The fraudulent bank documents. The attorney's threatening letter. Screenshots of the Facebook post and its comments. Statements from my neighbors about Emma's harassment. The security camera footage of her pounding on my door and waiting in the hallway for hours. It was overwhelming to see it all laid out like that, the full scope of Emma's campaign against me. Any single incident might have seemed minor, excusable. But together they painted a picture of sustained, escalating harassment. Rebecca filed 2 petitions simultaneously, one for a restraining order based on harassment, and 1 criminal complaint for bank fraud with the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. She also drafted a cease and desist letter demanding Emma remove the Facebook post and issue a public retraction, though she warned me that Emma probably wouldn't comply. What happens if she doesn't take down the post? I asked. Then we add defamation to the civil suit we're going to file after the restraining order is granted. We'll let her choose, stop now and face only the criminal fraud charges, or keep going and face both criminal and civil liability. The hearing for the restraining order was scheduled for 2 weeks out. In the meantime, I had to continue my life as if everything was normal, all while knowing that my daughter was out there telling anyone who would listen that I had dementia, that I needed to be saved from myself, that she was the victim in all of this. The Facebook post was shared over 400 times. It reached people I hadn't talked to in decades, old neighbors, former colleagues, distant relatives. Some of them reached out to me with messages of concern that barely masked their judgment. Others didn't bother reaching out at all, apparently content to believe Emma's version of events without ever asking for mine. I wanted to respond, to post my own story, to share the documentation that proved Emma was lying. But Rebecca advised against it. Don't engage on social media, she warned. Anything you post can and will be used against you. Let her hang herself with her own lies. When we go to court, we'll have evidence. She'll just have emotional manipulation. So I stayed silent on Facebook, though it killed me to watch the lies spread unchecked. Instead, I poured my energy into other things. I painted a series of watercolors based on Maya Angelou's poetry, dark, turbulent pieces that expressed everything I couldn't say out loud. I wrote in my journal every night, processing the grief and rage and guilt. I attended every therapy session with Dr. Kowalski and slowly started to untangle the decades of unhealthy patterns that had led me to this point. You're not responsible for Emma's choices, Dr. Kowalski reminded me during one particularly difficult session. You're not responsible for fixing her or saving her or protecting her from consequences. Your only responsibility is to yourself, to your safety, your well-being, your peace of mind. Then why do I still feel guilty? I asked, tears streaming down my face. Why do I wake up in the middle of the night wondering if I could have handled this differently, if I could have saved our relationship somehow? Because you're a mother, and mothers are conditioned to believe that our children's happiness is our responsibility. But Patricia, Emma is 40 years old. She's not a child anymore. Her happiness isn't your job. Her growth isn't your job. Her consequences aren't your job. Those words echoed in my mind as I prepared for the restraining order hearing. I practiced my testimony with Rebecca, learning to present the facts calmly and clearly without getting lost in emotion. I assembled a folder with every piece of evidence organized chronologically, a timeline of Emma's escalating behavior. The night before the hearing, I barely slept. I kept imagining what it would be like to face Emma in court, to look her in the eye while a judge decided whether she posed enough of a threat to me to warrant a legal order keeping her away. Part of me hoped she wouldn't show up, that she'd ignore the hearing and let the restraining order be granted by default. But I knew Emma better than that. She'd never miss an opportunity to paint herself as the victim, to perform for an audience. I was right. When I walked into the courtroom the next morning, Emma was already there with Brandon and an attorney I didn't recognize, not the same one who'd sent the threatening letter. This one was a woman in her 30s, dressed in an expensive suit, with the kind of polished professionalism that suggested Emma and Brandon had spent serious money on her. Emma looked terrible. Her hair was unwashed, pulled back in a messy ponytail. She wasn't wearing makeup, and her eyes were red and puffy like she'd been crying. She'd dressed in old jeans and an oversized sweater, nothing like the designer clothes I'd seen in her recent Instagram posts. The message was clear: look at this heartbroken, exhausted daughter, trying to save her mother from herself. She was performing. And she was good at it. When our eyes met across the courtroom, Emma's face crumpled. She started crying, loud, gasping sobs that echoed off the wooden walls. Brandon put his arm around her, and her attorney leaned in to whisper something presumably meant to be comforting. I felt Rebecca stiffen beside me. Don't react, she murmured. This is theater. The judge will see through it. I wasn't so sure. Because when I looked at the judge, the Honorable Margaret Delacroix, a woman in her late 50s with silver hair and a stern expression, I saw her glance at Emma with what looked like sympathy. If you've made it this far in my story, you understand what I was feeling in that moment. The fear that despite all the evidence, despite all the documentation, despite everything I'd done to protect myself, Emma's performance would win. That people would look at a crying daughter and a composed mother and decide that the composed one must be the villain. Leave a comment and tell me, have you ever been in a situation where the truth didn't matter as much as who could tell the better story? Because that's what I was facing. The hearing began with Judge Delacroix reviewing the petition. She asked Rebecca to present our case first. Rebecca stood, her posture perfect, her voice clear and professional. Your Honor, we're here today because Ms. Patricia Brennan has been subjected to a sustained campaign of harassment and fraud by her daughter, Emma Castellano. This isn't a case of a family disagreement that got out of hand. This is a case of an adult child systematically attempting to manipulate, control, and financially exploit her mother, and then retaliating when her mother finally set boundaries. She walked the judge through everything: the birthday party, the request for money, the changed locks, the police welfare check, the fraudulent bank documents, the Facebook post. She submitted evidence for each claim, organized and indexed with the precision of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. When she finished, Judge Delacroix looked at Emma's attorney. Counselor Wright, your response. Attorney Wright stood slowly, projecting reluctance, as if she hated to have to contradict anything Rebecca had said, but duty compelled her. Your Honor, what we have here is a tragic situation, a devoted daughter watching her mother's mental health deteriorate and trying desperately to get her help. My client admits that some of her methods may have been misguided. She was frantic with worry, Your Honor. She didn't know what else to do. Her mother had suddenly changed all her locks without warning, was sending bizarre messages, was exhibiting classic signs of paranoid delusions. Objection, Rebecca cut in. There is no medical evidence of any mental health issues with Ms. Brennan. In fact, we have statements from the police officers who conducted the welfare check confirming her complete competency. Sustained, Judge Delacroix said. Counselor Wright, do you have any medical evidence to support your claims of Ms. Brennan's alleged mental deterioration? Attorney Wright shifted uncomfortably. No, Your Honor, because Ms. Brennan has refused to undergo evaluation. Because there's nothing wrong with me, I said before I could stop myself. Rebecca shot me a warning look, but Judge Delacroix actually smiled slightly. Ms. Brennan, you'll have a chance to testify. For now, please let the attorneys finish. Attorney Wright continued, but I could tell she was on shaky ground. Your Honor, my client's actions were those of a frightened daughter trying to protect her mother. The bank inquiry was an attempt to ensure her mother's finances were safe. The Facebook post was a cry for help, hoping someone in Ms. Brennan's life could convince her to get treatment. As for the changed locks, my client had keys to her mother's apartment for emergencies. When those keys suddenly didn't work and her mother wouldn't return her calls, she panicked. And the forged medical documents? Rebecca asked sweetly. How do you explain submitting fraudulent paperwork to a financial institution? Attorney Wright's jaw tightened. My client denies creating any fraudulent documents. She may have consulted with a medical professional who provided documentation. A medical professional who doesn't exist, Rebecca interrupted. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the name on those documents, is not licensed in New York or any other state. The letterhead is fake. The documentation is fake. This was fraud, Your Honor, plain and simple. Judge Delacroix made a note on her legal pad. I'd like to hear from both parties directly. Ms. Brennan, please take the stand. I walked to the witness stand on legs that felt like rubber. I was sworn in, my hand shaking slightly as I placed it on the Bible. Then I sat down and looked directly at Judge Delacroix, avoiding Emma's tear-stained face in my peripheral vision. Ms. Brennan, Judge Delacroix began, tell me in your own words what led to you seeking this restraining order. So I did. I told her about my birthday, about the years of financial support I'd given Emma, about the text asking for $5,000 with no apology. I told her about changing my locks, about Emma's reaction, about the police being called to check on my welfare. I told her about the bank fraud attempt and the Facebook post. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I just presented the facts, calmly and clearly, the way Rebecca and I had practiced. When I finished, Judge Delacroix asked, do you believe your daughter poses a physical threat to you? Not physical, no. But I believe she poses a significant threat to my financial security, my reputation, and my mental well-being. She's attempted to gain control of my bank accounts through fraud. She's publicly accused me of having dementia to discredit me. She's recruited others to harass me on her behalf. Every time I set a boundary, she escalates. I don't know what she'll do next, but I know it will be worse than what she's already done. And what is your ultimate goal here? What outcome are you seeking? I took a deep breath. I want my daughter to leave me alone, Your Honor. I want her to face consequences for the fraud she committed. And I want to be able to live my life without constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for her next attack. Judge Delacroix nodded slowly, then turned to Emma. Ms. Castellano, please take the stand. Emma walked to the witness stand like she was walking to her own execution. Slow, reluctant, devastated. She was sworn in, and then she sat down and immediately started crying again. I'm so sorry, she sobbed, looking at me instead of at the judge. Mom, I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. I was just so scared. You weren't acting like yourself, and I didn't know what to do, and I... Ms. Castellano, Judge Delacroix said firmly, please address your comments to me, not to your mother. Emma turned reluctantly to the judge, wiping her eyes with a tissue her attorney handed her. Your Honor, I love my mother more than anything. She raised me alone, sacrificed everything for me. I would never, ever want to hurt her. But she's changed so much lately. She's become paranoid, accusing me of things I didn't do, cutting off everyone who cares about her. I was desperate to help her, and I made some mistakes. I see that now. But everything I did came from a place of love. Did you submit fraudulent medical documents to your mother's bank? Judge Delacroix asked bluntly. Emma's eyes widened. I consulted with someone who said they were a doctor. I believed the documentation they provided was legitimate. If it was fake, I didn't know. Who was this doctor? What was their name? Emma faltered. I don't remember. It was someone Brandon found online, someone who does consultations for families dealing with elderly relatives. Your mother is 63 years old, Judge Delacroix said dryly. She's hardly elderly, and if you truly believed she needed medical intervention, why didn't you speak to her actual doctor? Why didn't you encourage her to get evaluated by a legitimate medical professional? I tried. She refused. When did you try? Silence. Emma's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Ms. Castellano, I've reviewed all the evidence in this case. I've read the text messages between you and your mother. Not once did you express concern about her health. Not once did you ask her to see a doctor. What you did do was ask her for $5,000 1 week after missing her birthday party, with no apology and no acknowledgement of how that might have made her feel. And when she said no, you retaliated. That's what this is really about, isn't it? Not concern for your mother, but anger that she finally stopped giving you everything you wanted. Emma's face went pale, then red. That's not, you don't understand our relationship. I understand perfectly, Judge Delacroix said. I understand that your mother has extensive documentation of giving you over $87,000 over the past 15 years. I understand that you've only reached out to her when you needed something. I understand that when she finally set boundaries, you tried to paint her as mentally incompetent to discredit her. This court doesn't look kindly on adult children who exploit their parents and then play the victim when held accountable. The words hung in the air like a verdict. Emma's attorney looked like she wanted to object but couldn't figure out how. Judge Delacroix turned back to me. Ms. Brennan, I'm granting your petition for a restraining order. Ms. Castellano is to have no contact with you for a period of 2 years. No calls, no texts, no emails, no social media contact, and no third-party contact through friends or family. She is to stay at least 100 yards away from your residence, your place of worship, and any other location you regularly frequent. She turned back to Emma. Ms. Castellano, if you violate this order, you will be arrested. Do you understand? Emma nodded, still crying, but the tears looked different now, angrier, more frustrated than sad. Furthermore, Judge Delacroix continued, I'm referring the matter of the fraudulent bank documents to the Manhattan District Attorney's Office for potential prosecution. Ms. Castellano, you may want to retain a criminal defense attorney. Emma's face crumpled completely, and Brandon stood up, his face red with fury. This is insane. You're going to destroy her life over a family disagreement. Mr. Castellano, Judge Delacroix said coldly, sit down and be quiet or I'll hold you in contempt. Your wife attempted to commit bank fraud. That's not a family disagreement. That's a crime. I sat there watching this unfold, feeling strangely detached from it all. I'd won. The judge had seen through Emma's performance, had recognized the pattern of exploitation and retaliation. I'd gotten my restraining order. Emma was potentially facing criminal charges. So why did I feel so empty? The week after the hearing, I waited for relief to arrive, but what came instead was a grief so profound that I finally understood you can mourn someone who's still alive, and sometimes that mourning is more complicated than any funeral could ever be. I'd won in court. I had a legal document prohibiting Emma from contacting me, from coming near me, from continuing her harassment. Rebecca had called it a total victory, and Judge Delacroix's words about Emma's exploitation had been vindicating in a way I desperately needed. But victory tasted like ashes. I spent the first 3 days after the hearing in a kind of fog. I went through the motions, made breakfast, went to yoga, attended my painting class, but it all felt hollow, like I was watching someone else live my life while I floated somewhere above, disconnected and numb. Dr. Kowalski called it grief work. You're mourning the daughter you thought you had, she explained during our session that week. You're mourning the relationship you believed was real but maybe never was. That's legitimate loss, Patricia. It deserves to be felt. I don't know if I'm mourning Emma or mourning my own delusions about her, I admitted. Because when I look back now, with clear eyes, I can see that she's always been like this. Selfish, manipulative, entitled. I just made excuses for it. I told myself she was young, she was struggling, she'd grow out of it. But she never did. She just got better at using me. That realization, that you were complicit in enabling the behavior, is often the hardest part of this process, Dr. Kowalski said gently. It's easier to be angry at someone who suddenly changed than to admit they were always this way and you chose not to see it. She was right. The anger I felt toward Emma was complicated by anger at myself. How had I let this go on for so long? How had I ignored so many red flags, so many warning signs? How had I convinced myself that unconditional love meant unconditional tolerance of bad behavior? The Facebook post was still up, by the way. Despite the cease and desist letter, despite the restraining order, Emma hadn't taken it down. It had been shared over 600 times now, and the comments section had become a virtual support group for people whose parents had dementia. Complete strangers were offering Emma advice on nursing homes, memory care facilities, legal guardianship procedures. Rebecca was building a defamation case, but she warned me it would take time. The legal system moves slowly, she reminded me. But we're documenting everything. Every day that post stays up, every comment she responds to, every person she tells her version of the story to, it all strengthens our case. I wanted to care about building the case, about winning the defamation suit, about making Emma pay for her lies. But mostly I just wanted it to be over. I wanted to stop thinking about her, stop dreaming about her, stop carrying this heavy weight of betrayal and loss everywhere I went. On Thursday afternoon, 5 days after the hearing, I got a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Ms. Brennan? This is Detective James Rodriguez with the Manhattan DA's Economic Crimes Unit. I'm calling about the bank fraud case involving your daughter, Emma Castellano. My heart started pounding. Yes. I've reviewed the evidence your attorney submitted, and I wanted to let you know we're moving forward with charges. Ms. Castellano will be arraigned next week on 1 count of bank fraud and 1 count of forgery. I'll need you to come in and give a formal statement, but I wanted to give you a heads up first. What happens now? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She'll be arrested, arraigned, and then either released on bail or remanded depending on the judge's determination. Given that this is a non-violent offense and she has no prior record, she'll probably make bail. After that, we'll move toward trial unless she takes a plea deal. What kind of plea deal? That's up to the prosecutor and Ms. Castellano's attorney. But typically in cases like this, we'd offer something like probation, restitution, and community service in exchange for a guilty plea. If she goes to trial and loses, she could face up to 4 years in prison. 4 years. My daughter could go to prison for 4 years because she tried to steal from me. Ms. Brennan? Are you still there? Yes, I'm here. I need to think about this. Think about what? Whether you want to cooperate with the prosecution. Yes. There was a pause. Ms. Brennan, I understand this is your daughter. I know this must be incredibly difficult. But she committed a crime. If we let it slide, she'll just do it again. Maybe to you, maybe to someone else. People who commit financial fraud rarely stop on their own. They have to be stopped. I knew he was right. But knowing something intellectually and being able to accept it emotionally are two very different things. I'll call you back, I said. I just need a day to process this. I hung up and I sat on my couch for a long time, staring at nothing. This was the moment of truth, the point where I had to decide whether I was really willing to follow through with consequences or if I was going to fold, to protect Emma one more time, to choose her well-being over my own. I called Judith. The DA wants to press charges, I told her. Emma could go to prison. Judith was quiet for a moment. What do you want to do? I don't know. Part of me thinks she deserves it, that this is finally the consequence she needs. But part of me is still her mother, and the idea of her in prison makes me physically ill. Patricia, Judith said carefully, I'm going to tell you something I probably should have said years ago. You've been protecting Emma from consequences her entire life. Every time she screwed up, you fixed it. Every time she failed, you caught her. You taught her that there was always a safety net, that she'd never have to face the real results of her own choices. And now look where that's gotten you. Look where that's gotten her. Maybe prison isn't what she deserves. Maybe it's what she needs. Maybe it's the only thing that will finally force her to grow up. I wanted to argue, to defend Emma, to say that Judith didn't understand. But I couldn't. Because she was right. What kind of mother lets her daughter go to prison? I asked, my voice breaking. What kind of daughter tries to have her mother declared incompetent and steal her money? Judith countered. Patricia, you're not doing this to her. She did this to herself. You're just finally refusing to save her from it. That night, I wrote in my journal for 3 hours, trying to sort through my feelings. I made a list of pros and cons. I imagined different scenarios. Emma taking a plea deal, Emma going to trial, Emma serving time. I tried to predict how each path would affect her, affect me, affect our relationship, what was left of it. And then I did something I hadn't done in months. I prayed. I'm not particularly religious. I'd stopped going to church regularly after Emma's father left, when I'd been too exhausted from working 2 jobs to drag myself to Sunday services. But in that moment, I needed something bigger than myself to talk to. Some kind of guidance that wasn't coming from my own confused heart. I prayed for wisdom. I prayed for Emma, that she'd somehow find her way to being a better person. I prayed for myself, that I'd find the strength to make the right choice, whatever that was. And I prayed for peace, the kind of deep, lasting peace that I hadn't felt in longer than I could remember. When I was done, I didn't feel any sudden clarity, any divine intervention pointing me in one direction or another. But I did feel calmer, steadier. Like whatever I decided, I'd be able to live with it. The next morning, I called Detective Rodriguez back. I'll cooperate with the prosecution, I told him. But I want you to know something. I'm not doing this because I hate my daughter. I'm doing it because I love her. And I love her enough to let her face what she's done instead of protecting her from it one more time. I understand, Ms. Brennan. That takes real courage. Does it? I asked. Because mostly it just feels like giving up. It's not giving up, he said gently. It's letting go. There's a difference. I went to the DA's office the following Monday and gave my statement. I sat in a small conference room with Detective Rodriguez and an assistant DA named Nicole Harper, and I walked them through everything, the birthday party, the money, the harassment, the fake medical documents. They recorded my statement and had me sign various forms. The whole process took about 2 hours. As I was leaving, Nicole Harper stopped me at the door. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe in her mid-30s, with intelligent eyes and an expression that suggested she'd seen her share of family betrayals. Ms. Brennan, I want you to know something, she said. I've been prosecuting economic crimes for 8 years, and I've seen a lot of cases like this. Adult children exploiting their parents, taking advantage of love and trust. Most of those parents refuse to cooperate with prosecution. They protect their kids right up until there's nothing left to steal. The fact that you're willing to hold your daughter accountable, that's rare. And it's important. It doesn't feel important, I said quietly. It just feels like I'm destroying what's left of my family. Your daughter destroyed your family when she chose to commit fraud against you, Nicole replied. You're just refusing to help her hide from what she did. There's a difference. Those words echoed in my head as I rode the subway home. Everyone kept telling me there was a difference between consequences and cruelty, between boundaries and abandonment, between self-protection and revenge. But the line between those things felt impossibly thin, and I kept wondering which side I was actually on. Emma was arrested 3 days later. I only know because Judith called me, her voice tight with distress. Patricia, Emma's been arrested. Brandon just called me, absolutely hysterical. He's trying to make bail, but they set it at $50,000. He's asking if I can help, if I know anyone who can help. He specifically said not to tell you, but I thought you should know. My first instinct, honed by decades of maternal conditioning, was to ask how I could help. The words were forming on my lips. How much does he need? Can I wire it to him? Before I caught myself. What did you tell him? I asked instead. I told him I'd think about it. Patricia, I don't know what to do. She's my niece. But after everything she's done to you. Don't give him the money, I said firmly. If you do, you're just enabling the same pattern that got us here. Emma needs to face this. Really face it, without anyone swooping in to save her. Judith let out a long breath. You're right. I know you're right. It's just hard. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, I admitted. But I'm done being the person who makes it easy for Emma to avoid growing up. After we hung up, I sat with the knowledge that Emma was in jail. My daughter was in a cell somewhere, probably scared, probably angry, probably still convinced this was all somehow my fault. Part of me wanted to cry, but a larger part felt nothing at all, just a vast, empty numbness where maternal concern used to live. If you're still following this story, if you've made it through 6 chapters of watching me navigate this nightmare, then you understand what I mean when I say that sometimes love has to look like letting go. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is allow someone to face their own consequences. Leave a comment below and tell me, have you ever had to make a choice like this? Have you ever had to choose between protecting someone and protecting yourself? And make sure you check the description box for more stories about people who had to draw impossible lines with the people they loved. Brandon made bail 2 days later. I later learned he'd borrowed from his parents, something that apparently caused a massive fight between him and Emma because she was humiliated to have his family know about the arrest. The irony of Emma being humiliated about truth when she'd had no problem spreading lies about me was not lost on me. The week after Emma's arrest, something unexpected happened. I started receiving messages from people I barely knew, friends of friends, distant relatives, former neighbors, apologizing for believing Emma's Facebook post about my supposed dementia. The first one came from a woman named Carol Stevens, who'd lived in my building 15 years ago. Patricia, I just heard what really happened between you and Emma. I shared that Facebook post and I feel terrible. I should have reached out to you directly instead of just assuming. I'm so sorry. Then came another, from one of Emma's college friends who'd sent me that guilt-inducing text weeks ago. Ms. Brennan, I owe you an apology. Emma told me you were having a mental health crisis, and I believed her without question. I've since learned the truth about what she did, the fraud, the harassment, all of it. I'm horrified. I'm so sorry I took her side without knowing the facts. More messages followed. Apparently, word of Emma's arrest had spread, and with it, the real story. People were connecting dots they'd missed before, realizing that maybe the crying daughter wasn't the victim she claimed to be. Some of the messages were kind. Others were awkwardly apologetic, clearly written by people who felt obligated to say something but didn't know what. A few were surprisingly angry on my behalf, friends and acquaintances outraged that Emma had manipulated them into supporting her false narrative. I didn't know how to feel about any of it. Vindicated? Grateful? Angry that it had taken criminal charges for people to question Emma's version of events? Dr. Kowalski said it was okay to feel all of those things at once. Humans are complex, she reminded me. You don't have to pick one emotion and stick with it. You can be relieved that people now know the truth and also angry that they didn't believe you before. Both feelings are valid. The Facebook post finally came down, not because Emma chose to remove it, but because Facebook removed it after multiple people reported it as defamatory. Emma's profile went private shortly after, which I took to mean she was either embarrassed by the attention or preparing for trial and didn't want prosecutors using her social media against her. Rebecca was pleased. The fact that people are coming forward with apologies actually helps our defamation case. It proves your reputation was damaged by her false statements. We can use some of these messages as evidence of the harm caused. I don't know if I want to pursue the defamation suit anymore, I admitted. She's already facing criminal charges. Isn't that enough? Rebecca studied me for a long moment. Patricia, I need you to really think about what you're saying. Because this isn't about piling on. This is about compensation for real harm. She damaged your reputation, caused you emotional distress, forced you to spend money on legal fees to defend yourself. A defamation judgment would recover some of those costs and send a clear message that her behavior has lasting consequences. It feels vindictive, I said quietly. It's not vindictive. It's accountability. But ultimately, it's your choice. You don't have to decide right now. Let's see what happens with the criminal case first. Emma's arraignment had been brief. She'd pleaded not guilty, been released on bail, and been assigned a public defender since she and Brandon apparently couldn't afford a private attorney on top of the bail money they'd borrowed. Her trial was scheduled for 3 months out. Those 3 months passed in a strange kind of limbo. I was living my life, moving forward, building new routines and relationships that didn't revolve around Emma. But I was also constantly aware of the upcoming trial, of the fact that I'd have to testify against my own daughter in open court. I threw myself into my hobbies and volunteer work. My watercolor paintings improved significantly. I'd found a certain freedom in expressing emotion through color and form that I couldn't express in words. I'd started teaching a computer literacy class at the community center, helping seniors learn to use email and video chat and social media. There was something deeply satisfying about helping other people's mothers and fathers stay connected to their families, even as I was cutting ties with my own child. Judith became my anchor during this time. We had lunch together every week, sometimes more. She never pressured me to talk about Emma, but she was always there when I needed to. Having her support meant everything. It meant I wasn't alone, wasn't crazy, wasn't the monster Emma had tried to paint me as. One afternoon, about 6 weeks before the trial, Judith and I were having coffee at our favorite cafe when she said something that stopped me cold. I talked to Emma. I set down my cup carefully. When? Last week. She called me, crying, asking me to convince you to drop the charges. She said she'd made a terrible mistake, that she was sorry, that she never meant for things to go this far. What did you tell her? I told her it was too late for apologies. That she'd had dozens of chances to apologize sincerely, to make amends, to take responsibility for her actions. But instead, she doubled down at every turn. The police, the lawyers, the Facebook post, the fake medical documents. I told her that sorry doesn't fix what she broke. How did she respond? Judith's expression darkened. She got angry. Said I was supposed to be family, that I was betraying her just like you did. She said when this was all over and you'd ruined her life, I'd regret taking your side. Then she hung up on me. I felt a dull ache in my chest, not surprise, exactly, but a weary confirmation of what I already knew. Emma wasn't sorry for what she'd done. She was sorry for getting caught. I'm sorry she dragged you into this, I said. She didn't drag me into anything. I chose to believe you because you earned that belief through decades of being honest and reliable. Emma has earned nothing but skepticism. Judith reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You did the right thing, Patricia. Even if it doesn't always feel like it. The trial date approached with a terrible inevitability. Nicole Harper, the assistant DA, met with me several times to prepare my testimony. She walked me through the questions she'd ask, the questions Emma's defense attorney might ask on cross-examination, the importance of staying calm and factual no matter what. Emma's attorney will probably try to paint you as a vindictive mother who's exaggerating a family dispute, Nicole warned. They'll try to make this seem like normal family drama that you're weaponizing because Emma didn't give you enough attention or whatever narrative they think will resonate with the jury. Don't let them bait you into emotional responses. Just stick to the facts. What if I start crying? I asked. What if I can't hold it together? Then you cry. Juries expect emotion in cases like this. What they don't like is manipulation, and you've never been manipulative, Patricia. That's Emma's specialty, not yours. Just be yourself. Tell the truth. That's all you need to do. The night before the trial, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing through worst-case scenarios. What if the jury didn't believe me? What if Emma's performance swayed them? What if I fell apart on the stand and made myself look unstable? Around 2 in the morning, I got up and went to my desk. I pulled out an old photo album, one I hadn't looked at in years, and I started flipping through pictures of Emma as a child. There she was at age 3, covered in chocolate cake at her birthday party, grinning at the camera with frosting in her hair. There at age 7, missing her 2 front teeth, holding up a drawing she'd made of our family. There at age 12, awkward and gangly in her middle school graduation robes. There at age 18, beautiful and confident on her high school graduation day, her whole life ahead of her. Where had I lost her? Or had she always been lost, and I'd just been too busy trying to save her to notice? I closed the album and put it away. Looking at those pictures didn't help. That little girl with the chocolate-covered face was gone. In her place was a woman who'd tried to have me declared incompetent and steal my money. Mourning the child she'd been wouldn't change the adult she'd become. I went back to bed and somehow, finally, I slept. The trial began on a Wednesday morning in late October. The courthouse was in Lower Manhattan, all marble and solemnity and the weight of justice. I arrived early with Rebecca, who'd insisted on coming even though her role in the criminal proceedings was limited. Moral support, she'd said firmly. You're not facing this alone. Emma was already there when we arrived, sitting with her public defender at the defense table. She'd dressed carefully, a simple black dress, minimal makeup, hair pulled back in a neat bun. She looked young, vulnerable, nothing like the woman who'd raged outside my apartment door or forged medical documents. When our eyes met across the courtroom, she didn't look away. She held my gaze, her expression impossible to read. Was that regret? Anger? Fear? I couldn't tell anymore. I didn't know my own daughter well enough to read her face. The jury selection took most of the first day. I sat in the courtroom watching 12 strangers get questioned about their ability to be impartial, about their experiences with family conflict, about their understanding of fraud and forgery. By the time they were sworn in, it was late afternoon and the judge adjourned until the next day. Nicole Harper's opening statement the next morning was masterful in its simplicity. She didn't demonize Emma or try to make me into a perfect victim. She just laid out the facts, the documentary evidence of the fake medical letter, the bank's records of Emma's fraudulent attempt to access my accounts, the timeline of events that showed a clear pattern of retaliation. This case isn't about a family disagreement, Nicole told the jury. It's about a crime. A deliberate, calculated attempt to defraud a financial institution and gain unauthorized access to another person's accounts. The fact that the victim was the defendant's mother doesn't make it less of a crime. If anything, it makes it worse. We expect strangers to potentially deceive us. We don't expect our own children to forge medical documents and try to steal from us. Emma's public defender, a young man named Aaron Goldstein who looked fresh out of law school, tried a different approach. This is a case about a daughter who loves her mother too much, who saw what she believed were signs of cognitive decline and panicked, who made mistakes in her desperation to help, yes, but who never had criminal intent. The prosecution wants you to believe Emma Castellano is a calculating fraudster, but the evidence will show she's just a frightened daughter who went too far trying to protect her mother. It was a good narrative. If I hadn't lived through the reality of Emma's harassment, I might have believed it myself. I was called to testify that afternoon. Walking to the witness stand felt surreal, like moving through water. I was sworn in, took my seat, and tried to focus on Nicole Harper's kind face instead of Emma's presence at the defense table. Nicole walked me through my testimony methodically. The birthday party. The request for money. The changed locks. Emma's escalating responses. The fraudulent bank documents. I kept my voice steady, my answers brief and factual, exactly as we'd practiced. Ms. Brennan, Nicole asked, when you received notification from your bank about these documents submitted by your daughter, what was your reaction? I was shocked. And terrified. The idea that my own daughter would forge medical paperwork claiming I had dementia in order to gain access to my finances, it made me realize I didn't know her at all. Or maybe I did know her, but I'd been refusing to see who she really was. Objection, Aaron Goldstein said, standing. The witness is speculating about her daughter's character, not testifying about facts. Sustained, the judge ruled. Ms. Brennan, please stick to what happened, not your interpretations of your daughter's character. I nodded and continued, more carefully this time. Nicole led me through the rest of the evidence, then turned me over for cross-examination. Aaron Goldstein approached with a gentle smile, the kind lawyers use when they're about to try to tear you apart while seeming sympathetic. Ms. Brennan, You love your daughter, don't you? I did. I do. But I also have to protect myself from her. You've given her a lot of money over the years, haven't you? According to your own records, over $87,000. Yes. And she never asked for that money with a gun to your head, did she? You gave it willingly. I gave it because she asked, and because I believed a mother should help her daughter. But I've come to realize that wasn't help. It was enabling. But at the time, you didn't see it as enabling. You saw it as love. Yes. And when Emma reached out about needing money for what you believed was a vacation, isn't it possible she was embarrassed to tell you the real reason, that her husband had lost his job and they were struggling financially? If that were true, she could have been honest with me. But she wasn't struggling so much that she couldn't afford expensive restaurants and new clothes. I saw the Instagram posts. Aaron's smile tightened slightly. Social media isn't always an accurate representation of people's real lives, is it, Ms. Brennan? I suppose not. So isn't it possible that Emma was putting on a brave face publicly while privately struggling? And when you, her mother, her usual source of support, suddenly cut her off without warning, she panicked. I didn't cut her off without warning. I set a boundary after she missed my birthday party and asked for a substantial amount of money without any acknowledgement of how that might hurt me. That's not cutting someone off. That's expecting basic respect. Aaron moved on to the bank documents, trying to suggest that Emma had genuinely believed they were legitimate, that she'd been duped by some online consultant she'd found in her desperation to help me. He tried to paint the whole situation as a tragic misunderstanding, a daughter's misguided love. But Nicole had prepared me well. I didn't rise to the bait. I didn't get emotional or defensive. I just answered his questions truthfully, calmly, and by the time he finished, I could see some of the jurors looking at Emma differently. Less like a sympathetic daughter and more like what she actually was, someone who'd gotten caught and was now trying to rewrite history. The trial lasted 4 days total. The prosecution called several witnesses: David Winters from my bank, Officer Ramirez who'd done the welfare check, Rebecca Torres to testify about the broader pattern of harassment. The defense called only one witness, Emma herself. She performed beautifully. She cried at all the right moments. She talked about her love for me, her fear for my well-being, her desperation when I wouldn't respond to her concerns. She claimed she genuinely believed the medical documents were real, that she'd been scammed by someone posing as a doctor online. I was just so scared, she sobbed from the witness stand. My mom wasn't acting like herself. She was saying things that didn't make sense, pushing away everyone who loved her. I thought she was having some kind of breakdown. I thought I was helping her. I never meant to commit a crime. I never meant to hurt anyone. I just wanted my mom back. It was a compelling performance. But Nicole Harper was ready. Ms. Castellano, you say you were concerned about your mother's mental state, correct? Yes. When did this concern begin? A few months ago. She started acting differently. Can you be more specific? What behaviors concerned you? Emma hesitated. She was more withdrawn, less responsive to my calls and texts. Did it occur to you that your mother might have been less responsive because you'd stood her up on her birthday? I didn't stand her up. Brandon and I had a conflict. You had reservations at an expensive restaurant. You posted about it on Instagram. You made a choice, Ms. Castellano. You chose a date night with your husband over your mother's birthday party. That's not a conflict. That's a priority. Objection. Aaron Goldstein was on his feet. Argumentative. Withdrawn, Nicole said smoothly, moving on. Ms. Castellano, you testified that you consulted with a medical professional online about your mother's condition. Can you tell us this person's name? I don't remember. You don't remember the name of the doctor you consulted about your mother's alleged dementia? It was a stressful time. I wasn't keeping good records. Do you have any emails from this person? Any phone records? Any payment receipts for their consultation services? No. I paid cash. Cash? For an online consultation? Emma's face flushed. Yes. They had a PayPal or something. But you have no record of this transaction? No. Nicole pulled out a copy of the fraudulent medical letter. Ms. Castellano, this document is supposedly from Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a neuropsychologist. Are you aware that there is no licensed neuropsychologist by that name in New York State? I didn't know that at the time. Are you aware that the letterhead on this document is identical to a template that can be purchased online for $19.95? Emma's face went pale. No. I told you, I thought it was real. Ms. Castellano, the bank's fraud investigation found that this document was created on a computer registered to your home IP address. Can you explain that? The courtroom went silent. Emma's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. I watched her panic, watched her scramble for an explanation that wouldn't come. Maybe the consultant remotely accessed our computer, or maybe Brandon was helping me and he. So now you're saying your husband created these documents? No. I don't know. I'm confused. This is all so overwhelming. You're confused about whether you or your husband forged medical documents to defraud a bank? Objection. Aaron Goldstein practically shouted. The prosecutor is badgering the witness. Sustained, the judge said. Ms. Harper, move on. But the damage was done. I could see it in the jurors' faces, the skepticism, the realization that Emma's story didn't add up. She wasn't a devoted daughter who'd made an honest mistake. She was someone who'd gotten caught in a lie and was desperately trying to talk her way out of it. The closing arguments the next day sealed Emma's fate. Aaron Goldstein tried his best, appealing to the jury's sympathy, asking them to consider the complexity of family relationships, suggesting that honest mistakes shouldn't be criminalized. But Nicole Harper's closing was devastating in its clarity. The defense wants you to believe this was a misunderstanding, Nicole told the jury. That Emma Castellano was simply a concerned daughter who went too far. But the evidence tells a different story. It tells the story of a woman who, when her mother finally said no to her demands for money, launched a sustained campaign of harassment and fraud. She called the police claiming her mother was incompetent. She recruited friends to pressure her mother into compliance. She hired a lawyer to threaten her mother with guardianship proceedings. And when none of that worked, she forged medical documents and tried to gain control of her mother's bank accounts. This wasn't panic. This wasn't misguided love. This was calculated retaliation. And the fact that the victim was her own mother makes it more reprehensible, not less. Because Patricia Brennan trusted her daughter. She'd spent decades supporting her, loving her, giving her everything she asked for. And Emma Castellano repaid that trust by attempting to rob her. The defense wants you to sympathize with Emma Castellano. But I ask you to sympathize with Patricia Brennan, a 63-year-old woman who worked her entire life to build a modest nest egg, only to have her own daughter try to steal it. A woman who raised her daughter alone, sacrificed for her, loved her unconditionally. A woman who finally gathered the courage to set a boundary, and was punished for it with harassment, defamation, and fraud. This case isn't about family dysfunction. It's about a crime. And when you deliberate, I ask you to remember that love doesn't give anyone, not even a daughter, the right to forge documents and commit fraud. Thank you. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. When they returned, their faces were grave. The foreperson stood and read the verdict. In the case of the People versus Emma Castellano, on the count of bank fraud, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of forgery in the second degree, we find the defendant guilty. I watched Emma's face crumble. She turned to Brandon, who sat in the front row behind the defense table, and he looked back at her with an expression that was equal parts devastation and anger. Aaron Goldstein was already talking to Emma in urgent whispers, probably about appeals, but I could see from her body language that she wasn't listening. She was staring at me, tears streaming down her face, her mouth forming words I couldn't hear over the noise in the courtroom. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt tired. The judge set a sentencing hearing for 3 weeks later and adjourned the court. As people started filing out, Rebecca touched my arm. You did it, she said quietly. You held her accountable. I know. So why do I feel so terrible? Because she's still your daughter. And no matter what she did, that doesn't stop hurting. Rebecca paused. But Patricia, you did the right thing. For you and for her. Maybe this will finally be the wake-up call she needs. I wanted to believe that. I wanted to think that Emma would serve whatever sentence she received, would go through whatever consequences awaited her, and would emerge on the other side as a better person. Someone who understood accountability, who'd learned from her mistakes, who'd finally grown up. But I'd wanted a lot of things over the years. And wanting something didn't make it real. The sentencing hearing 3 weeks later was shorter and somehow more painful than the trial itself. Emma's attorney submitted letters from friends and family, not from me or Judith, but from Brandon's parents, some of Emma's college friends, a former boss who remembered her as a dedicated employee. They all painted a picture of a good person who'd made a terrible mistake, who deserved leniency, who would contribute positively to society if given a chance. Nicole Harper submitted a victim impact statement that I'd written, though I couldn't bring myself to read it aloud in court. In it, I detailed the emotional toll of Emma's actions, the money I'd spent on legal fees, the damage to my reputation, the relationships that had been strained or broken. I concluded by saying that while I didn't hate my daughter, I also couldn't minimize what she'd done. That real love sometimes meant letting people face real consequences. Judge Delacroix, the same judge who'd granted my restraining order, reviewed everything carefully before speaking. Ms. Castellano, I've presided over many cases of financial fraud in my career. Some involved career criminals, people who made their living stealing from others. But some of the most egregious cases I've seen involved family members, people who exploited the trust of those who loved them most. Your case falls into that latter category. You didn't steal from a stranger or a corporation. You targeted your own mother. You attempted to use her love for you, her desire to help you, as a weapon against her. And when she finally stood up for herself, you retaliated with a campaign of harassment that included forging medical documents, filing false reports, and public defamation. Your attorney has asked for leniency, citing your lack of prior criminal record and your youth. But Ms. Castellano, you're 40 years old. You're not a confused teenager. You're an adult who made calculated decisions to break the law when you didn't get what you wanted. The prosecution has recommended 18 months in prison followed by probation. I'm inclined to agree. However, I'm willing to consider an alternative if you show genuine remorse and willingness to make amends. Emma stood up quickly, hope flashing across her face. Your Honor, I am sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. I love my mother and I never meant to hurt her. Judge Delacroix held up a hand. Ms. Castellano, I'm not interested in hearing what you think I want to hear. I'm interested in whether you're capable of genuine accountability. So I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I want a direct answer. Do you believe you committed a crime, or do you believe you were unjustly prosecuted for trying to help your mother? The courtroom went silent. This was the moment of truth. Emma could either accept responsibility or continue her victim narrative. And I knew in my bones, which choice she'd make even before she opened her mouth. Your Honor, I believe the situation got out of hand. I made mistakes in judgment, yes. But I was trying to help my mother, and I think the criminal justice system isn't always equipped to understand the complexity of family dynamics. Stop. Judge Delacroix's voice was sharp. You just answered my question. You still believe you're the victim here. You still think this prosecution was unfair, that you didn't really do anything wrong, that you're being punished for caring too much. Emma's face flushed. I'm just saying that context matters. Context does matter. And the context is that you forged medical documents to defraud a bank. That's not a mistake in judgment. That's a felony. And the fact that you still can't take full responsibility tells me that leniency would be wasted on you. Judge Delacroix shuffled some papers, her expression grave. Emma Castellano, I hereby sentence you to 18 months in a federal correctional facility, followed by 3 years of supervised probation. You will also be required to pay restitution to your mother for her legal fees, which currently total $43,000. You will have no contact with your mother during your sentence or probation period unless she initiates it. And you will be required to complete a program in financial ethics and family systems therapy as conditions of your probation. She brought down her gavel. Court is adjourned. Emma collapsed into her seat, sobbing. Brandon rushed to her side, and I heard him saying something about appeals, about how this wasn't over, about how they'd fight this. But it was over. Emma was going to prison. I stood up on shaky legs, and Rebecca guided me out of the courtroom before Emma could see me leave. We made it to the hallway before my knees buckled, and Rebecca caught me, holding me up while I tried to remember how to breathe. It's done, Rebecca said quietly. It's finally done. But it didn't feel done. It felt like the end of one chapter and the terrifying beginning of another. One where I had to figure out who I was without the weight of Emma's needs and demands and crises. One where I had to learn to be Patricia Brennan, not just Emma's mother. If you've stayed with me through this entire story, through all the pain and betrayal and impossible choices, then you know what it means to have to rebuild yourself after someone you loved tears you down. You know what it feels like to stand at the edge of a new life and not know if you're strong enough to live it. Leave a comment and tell me your story. Tell me how you rebuilt. Tell me it gets easier. Because right now, standing in that courthouse hallway with my daughter's sobs still echoing in my ears, I couldn't imagine how anything would ever feel easy again. The next few days were a blur. I went through the motions: work, yoga, painting class, therapy. Dr. Kowalski spent our sessions helping me process the complex emotions surrounding Emma's sentencing. Grief and relief. Guilt and vindication. Freedom and loss. You made the choice that protected you, Dr. Kowalski reminded me. That doesn't make it painless. It just makes it necessary. Will I ever stop feeling like a failure as a mother? I asked. You weren't a failure as a mother, Patricia. You were a failure at being your daughter's enabler. Those are two very different things. I clung to those words in the quiet moments, when the guilt threatened to overwhelm me. I'd done the right thing. I'd held Emma accountable. I'd protected myself. Repeating these truths didn't make them hurt less, but it made them bearable. Judith visited frequently, bringing takeout and wine and the kind of sisterly support that comes without judgment. We didn't always talk about Emma. Sometimes we just sat together watching old movies or working on crossword puzzles, finding comfort in companionship that didn't require words. You're stronger than you think, Judith told me one evening. You've been through hell, and you're still standing. That counts for something. Does it? I asked. Because mostly I just feel broken. Broken things can be mended. And sometimes they're stronger in the broken places. I wanted to believe her. Emma began her sentence 2 weeks later. She was transferred to a federal correctional facility in upstate New York, about 3 hours from the city. Brandon had stopped calling Judith, stopped trying to reach out through mutual acquaintances. I later learned through the grapevine that his parents had essentially disowned Emma, furious that their son had gotten caught up in her legal troubles and that their money had gone toward bail and attorneys for crimes they considered indefensible. I didn't visit Emma. The restraining order was still in effect, and Judge Delacroix had been clear that contact was prohibited unless I initiated it. But even if it had been allowed, I wasn't ready. I didn't know if I'd ever be ready. Instead, I focused on rebuilding my life. I'd lost 18 months to Emma's chaos, 18 months of stress and fear and legal battles and emotional devastation. I was determined not to lose more time mourning what couldn't be fixed. I signed up for an advanced watercolor workshop at the Art Students League. I started volunteering more hours at the community center, expanding my computer literacy classes and starting a new program helping seniors with financial literacy, teaching them how to protect themselves from scams and exploitation. There was a bitter irony in that, teaching other people's parents the lessons I'd failed to teach my own daughter, but it also felt meaningful. Maybe I couldn't fix my own family, but I could help protect others. I even went on a few dates, nothing serious, just coffee or dinner with men from the singles group Judith had convinced me to join. It felt strange, putting myself out there at 63, trying to build a romantic life after so many years of being alone. But it also felt hopeful, like maybe there were still good chapters ahead in my story. 3 months into Emma's sentence, I received a letter. It came to Rebecca's office rather than my home address, forwarded by the prison system. My hands shook as I opened it. Mom, it began. I don't know if you'll read this. I don't know if you'll ever want to hear from me again. But I'm sitting in this cell with nothing but time to think, and I need to try to explain. I've been angry at you for so long. Angry that you weren't perfect, that you couldn't give me everything I wanted, that you had needs and boundaries and a life that didn't revolve around me. I've spent 40 years believing that your job was to make me happy, to fix my problems, to fund my life. And when you finally said no, I felt betrayed. But you weren't betraying me. I was betraying you. I was betraying everything you taught me, everything you sacrificed for me, everything you gave me. I sit here and I think about that birthday party you planned. I think about you sitting at that table alone, waiting for people who never came. I think about the balloons and the cake and the good china. I think about how you must have felt, watching the clock, realizing that your own daughter chose a restaurant over you. And I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so deeply, impossibly sorry. I know sorry doesn't fix anything. I know it doesn't undo the police calls or the fake medical documents or the lies I told about you. I know it doesn't give you back the money you spent on lawyers or the peace of mind I stole from you. But it's all I have. My therapist here, they make us all see therapists, says I have a lot of work to do. She says I've been using people my entire life, taking what I wanted and never thinking about the cost to them. She says I learned early that crying and manipulation would get me what I wanted, and I never learned any other way to be. She's right. And I hate that she's right. I don't know who I am without being your daughter, Mom. Without being the person who called you when she needed something, who showed up only when it benefited her, who took and never gave back. That's the only identity I've ever had. And now that it's gone, I'm terrified that there's nothing underneath. That I'm hollow. Asterisk, but I'm trying. I'm trying to figure out how to be a person who thinks about other people, who takes responsibility, who doesn't blame everyone else for her own choices. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to write back or visit or ever want to see me again. You have every right to cut me out of your life completely. I've earned that. But I wanted you to know that I see it now. I see what I did. I see who I was. And I'm trying, really trying, to become someone different. I love you, Mom. I know I showed it in terrible ways. I know I hurt you more than I can ever make right. But I do love you. And I'm sorry. Emma asterisk. I read that letter 5 times, sitting in Rebecca's office while she worked quietly at her desk, giving me space to process. When I finally looked up, my face was wet with tears. I hadn't realized I was crying. What do you think? I asked Rebecca. Is it real? Or is it just another manipulation? Rebecca set down her pen and looked at me with those wise, compassionate eyes. Patricia, I don't know. Only time will tell whether Emma's capable of real change. But I do know this, whether or not you believe her, whether or not you respond, whether or not you ever rebuild your relationship with her, that's entirely up to you. You don't owe her forgiveness. You don't owe her another chance. You only owe yourself peace. Peace. That elusive thing I'd been chasing for months. Did I feel peaceful after reading Emma's letter? Not exactly. But I felt something, a slight loosening of the knot in my chest, a small opening where hope might eventually grow. I folded the letter carefully and put it in my purse. I need to think about this. Take all the time you need, Rebecca said. 6 months after Emma's sentencing, I woke up one morning and realized I'd gone an entire week without thinking about her. And I learned that healing isn't a straight line. It's a messy, zigzagging path where progress sometimes looks like forgetting the person who hurt you ever existed. I was standing in my kitchen making coffee when this realization hit me. 7 days. 7 whole days of living my life, going to my painting class, having lunch with Judith, attending a book club meeting, going on a second date with a man named Robert who made me laugh, without Emma's absence feeling like a gaping wound. It felt like betrayal at first, this moving on. Like I was supposed to carry the weight of our broken relationship forever, a penance for whatever maternal failures had led us here. But then I thought about what Dr. Kowalski had been telling me for months. You're allowed to be happy, Patricia. Your daughter's choices don't get to dictate the rest of your life. I'd started to believe her. My apartment looked different now. I'd redecorated, slowly, replacing things that carried memories of Emma with things that were just mine. New curtains in the living room, a vibrant blue that made me think of the ocean. New art on the walls, some pieces I'd bought from local artists, some of my own watercolors that I'd finally gotten brave enough to frame. I'd rearranged the furniture, creating a reading nook by the window where I spent weekend mornings with books and tea. The dining room table where I'd waited alone on my birthday now hosted monthly dinner parties. I'd started inviting people over, Judith and Paul, friends from my painting class, women from the book club, Robert and his daughter from his first marriage. I'd learned to cook new things, recipes I found online or in the cooking class I'd taken at the community center. My home had become a place of life and laughter again, not just a museum of disappointment. Emma's childhood bedroom, which I'd kept frozen in time like a shrine for years, had been transformed into a proper guest room. I'd donated her old posters and teenage memorabilia, had replaced the twin bed with a queen, had painted the walls a warm grey and hung simple, elegant art. When Judith stayed over, or when Robert's daughter needed a place to crash when she visited the city, they slept in a room that wasn't haunted by my daughter's ghost. This felt like progress. But it also felt like erasure, and I wasn't sure if that was healthy or just another form of avoidance. It's not erasure, Dr. Kowalski assured me during our weekly session. It's reclaiming your space. You're allowed to have a home that isn't a shrine to someone who hurt you. She's in prison because of me, I said, the guilt surfacing even as I tried to push it down. What kind of mother am I? What kind of daughter commits fraud against her mother? Dr. Kowalski countered gently. Patricia, we've been through this. You didn't put Emma in prison. Her choices did. Her refusal to take responsibility did. Her pattern of escalation did. You just stopped protecting her from the consequences. I knew she was right. Intellectually, I knew. But guilt doesn't respond to logic. Emma's letter sat in my desk drawer. I took it out sometimes, reading it over and over, trying to determine if her words were genuine or just another performance. The therapist in prison. The acknowledgement of manipulation. The apology. It all sounded good. But Emma had always been good with words, especially when they got her what she wanted. And what did she want now? My forgiveness? My money when she got out? Or had she actually changed? I hadn't responded to the letter. For months had passed since it arrived, and I still didn't know what to say. Rebecca had advised waiting, seeing if Emma wrote again, looking for patterns in her behavior over time. One letter doesn't mean transformation, Rebecca had said. Real change is consistent, sustained, proven through actions over months and years. Emma wrote again 6 weeks later, and then again 3 weeks after that. Each letter was similar, apologetic, reflective, claiming growth and change. But she never pushed for a response. Never demanded I visit or write back. Never asked for money or favors. The letters simply arrived, quiet testaments to whatever work she was doing inside those prison walls. I still didn't respond. Instead, I focused on building the life I'd always wanted but had been too busy being Emma's mother to create. I traveled, just a weekend trip to Boston to visit old college friends, but it felt monumental. I'd never traveled alone before, had always been too worried about being available if Emma needed me. But I booked the train ticket, stayed in a modest hotel, walked the Freedom Trail and visited museums and ate expensive dinners by myself without guilt. It was liberating. Robert and I were seeing each other regularly now. Nothing official, no labels, just two people in their 60s who'd both been through difficult marriages and complicated relationships with their adult children, finding comfort in companionship. He was recently divorced, his wife having left him for someone younger after 35 years of marriage. His daughter, Michelle, was estranged from her mother and working through her own therapy about family betrayal. We're quite the pair, Robert joked one evening over dinner at his apartment. Broken by the people who were supposed to love us most. Are we broken? I asked. Or just wounded? Is there a difference? I think so. Broken means beyond repair. Wounded means still healing. He'd reached across the table and taken my hand. Then we're wounded. And maybe we can heal together. It wasn't a grand romance. It wasn't the kind of passionate love story you see in movies. But it was comfortable and kind and honest, and after everything I'd been through, those things felt more valuable than passion. Judith was thrilled, of course. It's about time you had someone who actually cares about your happiness, she'd said when I told her about Robert. You've spent your whole life caring for everyone else. You deserve someone who cares for you. I feel guilty, I'd admitted. Like I shouldn't be happy while Emma's in prison. Emma's in prison because of Emma's choices, Judith had said firmly. You're allowed to live your life, Patricia. You're allowed to be happy. Stop waiting for permission from someone who never gave you any consideration. Her words echoed in my mind often during those months. Stop waiting for permission. I'd spent so much of my life seeking validation from Emma. Validation that I was a good mother, that my sacrifices meant something, that I mattered. But Emma had never been capable of giving me that validation. She'd only been capable of taking. So I started validating myself. I celebrated small victories, a painting I was proud of, a successful computer class at the community center, a day where I felt genuinely happy instead of just okay. I kept a gratitude journal, something Dr. Kowalski had suggested, writing down 3 things each night that had made me smile or feel grateful. Some entries were simple. Good coffee. Sunshine. Judith's laugh. Others were more significant. Helped Mrs. Rodriguez set up video chat with her grandson in California. She cried when she saw his face. Reminded me why this work matters. And once, about 8 months after Emma's sentencing, Realized today that I like the person I'm becoming. That even without being Emma's mother, I'm someone worth being. That last entry had made me cry, but they were good tears. Healing tears. The Manhattan DA's office had started the process of collecting the $43,000 in restitution that Emma owed me for legal fees. I received a letter explaining that they'd garnish any wages Emma earned in prison and after her release until the debt was paid. It would take years, maybe decades, but the money would eventually come back. I didn't care about the money anymore. But I appreciated that the system was holding Emma accountable, even in this small way. That there were real, tangible consequences that would follow her long after she left prison. The Facebook post that had caused so much damage, the one where Emma had claimed I had dementia, had been permanently removed. Rebecca had filed the defamation suit, and Emma's public defender had advised her not to contest it given her criminal conviction. The settlement was sealed, but it included Emma agreeing never to speak publicly about me again, never to post about our relationship on social media, and to pay additional damages that went toward covering my remaining legal fees. It felt like closing doors. One by one, the avenues through which Emma could hurt me were being sealed off. And while part of me mourned the necessity of these legal barriers between a mother and daughter, a larger part felt relieved. Safe. Protected. I stopped checking Emma's social media accounts. She couldn't post from prison anyway, and what was the point? I unfollowed mutual friends who might share updates about her. I created a new normal that didn't include waiting for the next crisis, the next demand, the next betrayal. And slowly, painfully, beautifully, I started to feel like myself again. Or maybe not again, maybe for the first time. Because the Patricia I was becoming wasn't the martyred mother or the endless ATM or the woman who set herself on fire to keep others warm. This Patricia had boundaries. This Patricia said no when she meant no. This Patricia valued her own peace more than other people's comfort. She was someone I was starting to like. Emma was released after serving 13 months of her 18-month sentence, early release for good behavior and completion of the required programs. I only knew because Rebecca's office received notification, as was required given the restraining order and the ongoing probation. She's out, Rebecca said when she called to tell me. She's staying at a halfway house in Queens, required to check in with her probation officer weekly. The no-contact order is still in effect for another year. My first reaction was panic. Emma was out. Emma was in the same city. Emma could, theoretically, find me even with the restraining order in place. My second reaction was curiosity. Had prison changed her? Were the letters real? Was she actually different? My third reaction was anger at myself for caring. Why did I still care? Why, after everything, did part of me still want to believe my daughter could be redeemed? Patricia. Rebecca's voice pulled me back. Are you okay? I don't know, I admitted. I thought I'd feel relieved when her sentence was done. Like finally we could both move on. But instead I just feel scared. That's normal. You've built a life without her, and now she's back in the world, even if she's not supposed to be in your life. It's unsettling. What if she violates the restraining order? Then she goes back to prison. But Patricia, from what I understand, she's been compliant. She's attending her therapy appointments, checking in with her probation officer, working at the job they got her through the halfway house program. She's following the rules. For now, I said. But Emma's always followed rules when people were watching. It's what she does when no one's looking that worries me. Then we stay vigilant. We document everything. And we trust the system to work. I wanted to trust the system. But the system had also let Emma manipulate it multiple times. The wellness check, the bank fraud attempt that almost succeeded. Systems were only as good as the people operating them, and people could be fooled. Still, what choice did I have? I couldn't control Emma's behavior. I could only control my response to it. I doubled down on my security measures, made sure my doorbell camera was working, reminded my neighbors about the restraining order, gave Robert and Judith copies of the legal paperwork just in case. I felt ridiculous, like I was preparing for a siege. But I also felt safer. 3 weeks after Emma's release, another letter arrived. *Mom. I'm out. I'm sure you already know that. I'm sure you've been told about the halfway house, about my job washing dishes at a diner in Astoria, about my probation requirements. I'm not writing to ask for anything. I know I'm not allowed to contact you. I'm sending this through my lawyer to yours, which I guess is how we communicate now if we communicate at all. I just wanted you to know that I meant what I said in my letters. Prison gave me time to think, really think, about who I'd become. About what I'd done to you. To myself. To my marriage. Brandon divorced me while I was inside. Did you know that? His lawyer sent papers 2 months into my sentence. He said he couldn't be married to a felon, that his family would never accept me, that I'd humiliated him. Part of me was angry. But mostly I understood. I'd dragged him into my mess. I'd destroyed our life because I couldn't accept being told no. I'm working on that now. Accepting no. Accepting consequences. Accepting that I'm responsible for where I am. My therapist says I need to make amends, but that amends aren't about being forgiven. They're about acknowledging harm and changing behavior. So this is me acknowledging, I harmed you, Mom. Deeply. I exploited your love, weaponized the legal system against you, tried to steal from you, lied about you publicly. I harmed you in ways that can't be undone. And I'm changing my behavior. I'm not going to call you or show up at your apartment or try to force my way back into your life. I'm going to respect your boundaries. I'm going to focus on becoming someone who deserves a second chance, even if I never get one from you. I don't know if we'll ever have a relationship again. Maybe too much has been broken. Maybe you're happier without me. Maybe I don't deserve a place in your life anymore. But I wanted you to know, I'm trying. I'm really, honestly trying to be better. Your daughter. Emma *. I read this letter sitting at my dining room table, the same table where I'd sat alone on my birthday more than a year ago. So much had changed since then. I'd changed. And maybe Emma had changed too. Or maybe this was just another manipulation, more sophisticated than before but manipulation nonetheless. I didn't know. And the not knowing was perhaps the hardest part. Because if Emma was genuine, if she really had transformed, then keeping her shut out of my life meant denying her the chance at redemption. But if she was lying, if this was just another long game, then letting her back in meant risking everything I'd built, all the healing I'd done, all the peace I'd found. How do you know when someone has really changed? How do you tell the difference between genuine remorse and performed contrition? I took the letter to my therapy session that week. Dr. Kowalski read it carefully, then looked at me. What do you want to do? She asked. I don't know. Part of me wants to believe her. Part of me wants to write back, to start rebuilding something. But I'm terrified of being fooled again. Those are all valid feelings. So let me ask you a different question. What would you need to see from Emma to believe she's changed? What actions, sustained over what period of time, would convince you this is real? I thought about it. I'd need to see her living independently, taking care of herself without asking me for help. I'd need to see her maintaining steady employment, meeting her obligations, staying out of trouble. I'd need to see her respecting my boundaries even when it's hard, even when she wants something from me. I'd need to see her taking responsibility without excuse or justification. And I'd need to see all of that for, I don't know, a year, 2 years? Long enough that it's clearly a pattern, not just a performance. That's reasonable, Dr. Kowalski said. So here's what I'd suggest. You don't have to decide right now whether to let Emma back into your life. You can wait. You can watch from a distance. You can require evidence of sustained change before you even consider opening that door. And in the meantime, you continue living your life, building your happiness, protecting your peace. What if she really has changed and I miss the chance to reconnect? Then that's the consequence of her past actions. Patricia, you don't owe her instant forgiveness just because she claims to be different. Real change proves itself over time. If Emma's transformation is genuine, it will still be genuine 2 years from now. She can wait. I held on to those words like a lifeline. She can wait. For once in our relationship, Emma could be the one waiting, hoping, uncertain. She could be the one wondering if she'd ever earn back what she'd lost. I decided not to respond to the letter. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I would live my life, continue my healing, and let time reveal whether Emma's changes were real or just another chapter in a long story of manipulation. Because I'd finally learned what I should have learned decades ago. I was allowed to protect myself, even from my own daughter. Especially from my own daughter. And that wasn't cruelty. It was survival. A year passed with Emma on the periphery of my life, a distant figure I heard about occasionally but never saw, and I discovered that peace doesn't always feel triumphant. Sometimes it just feels like the exhausted quiet after a storm, when you're too tired to do anything but sit among the wreckage and breathe. The letters kept coming. Not frequently. Emma seemed to understand that flooding me with correspondence would feel like pressure, like another form of manipulation. But every 6 to 8 weeks, another envelope would arrive through the lawyers, another update on her life, another expression of remorse and growth. I read them all. I kept them in a folder in my desk, organized chronologically, documenting what Emma claimed was her transformation. But I never responded. Through these letters, I learned things about my daughter's life that she'd never shared when we were in regular contact. She was still working at the diner, had been promoted to shift supervisor. She was attending AA meetings even though she'd never had a drinking problem. Her therapist had suggested it as a way to learn about accountability and community support. She'd started volunteering at a women's shelter, helping other women who were trying to rebuild their lives after incarceration. She wrote about the shame of living in a halfway house at 40 years old, of having to ask permission for basic freedoms, of working a minimum wage job when she'd once had a comfortable life with Brandon. But she also wrote about gratitude, for the second chance, for the structure, for the people who were willing to see her as more than her worst mistakes. I'm learning that rock bottom has a basement, one letter said. I thought prison was the lowest I could go. But it's actually this, being out in the world, watching everyone else live normal lives while I'm scraping by, knowing it's all my own fault. That's the real punishment. Not the bars or the jumpsuit, but the knowing. I didn't know if I believed her. But I was listening. Rebecca received regular updates from Emma's probation officer. I'd requested them as part of the restitution agreement. Emma was complying with all requirements. Weekly check-ins, never missed. Drug tests, all clean. Therapy appointments, attended consistently. The required financial literacy and family systems courses, completed with high marks. She was even making small monthly payments toward the restitution she owed me, $25 a month, pathetically small but technically fulfilling her obligation. She's doing everything right, Rebecca told me during one of our quarterly check-ins. I've seen a lot of people on probation, Patricia. Most of them do the bare minimum and resent every second of it. Emma seems to be, actually trying. Or she's gotten better at performing, I said. Rebecca gave me a thoughtful look. Maybe. But at what point does consistent performance become real change? If someone acts like a different person long enough, don't they eventually become that person? It was a question I couldn't answer. My life continued to evolve in ways that had nothing to do with Emma. Robert and I had gotten serious, not living together, we were both too old and set in our ways for that, but serious enough that we'd started talking about the future. About traveling together once he retired. About maybe eventually combining households if it made sense. About being partners, not just people dating. His daughter Michelle had become a friend. She was 32, working as a social worker, and dealing with her own complicated feelings about her mother's abandonment. We'd bonded over our shared experiences of family betrayal, and she'd started joining Robert and me for dinners and museum visits. It was strange, building a relationship with someone else's child when my own daughter was effectively exiled from my life. But it was also healing. You're like the mother I wish I'd had, Michelle told me once, after a dinner where I'd helped her strategize about a difficult case at work. Then her face had gone red. I'm sorry, that was insensitive. No, I'd interrupted gently. It wasn't. Thank you. That means more than you know. Because it did mean something. It meant that despite my failures with Emma, I was still capable of maternal care. I could still nurture and support and guide. The problem hadn't been my capacity to mother. It had been the specific dysfunction of my relationship with Emma, the toxic patterns we'd built together over decades. I'd also grown closer with some of the seniors I worked with at the community center, particularly a woman named Rose Chen, no relation to my neighbor Margaret, who was 78 and sharp as a tack. Rose had become something of a mentor to me, despite being 15 years older. You think your story is unique, she'd said one day when I'd confided in her about Emma. Honey, I've got 3 children. One hasn't spoken to me in 20 years because I wouldn't give her money for a business venture that was obviously a scam. One calls me twice a year on my birthday and Christmas. And one, my youngest, actually sees me as a person. She visits, she calls, she includes me in her life. Out of 3, I got 1 good relationship. And you know what I learned? That's not bad odds. Some people get 0. How do you live with that? I'd asked. With knowing 2 of your children just don't care about you. Rose had shrugged. I decided their indifference wasn't going to define my life. I've got friends, hobbies, a community. I've got my youngest daughter and her kids. I've got a life that's full and meaningful even without the children who chose to walk away. You can do the same. Her words had stayed with me. You can have a full life even without the people who chose to leave it. It seemed obvious when stated that plainly, but somehow I'd needed to hear it. I'd started painting more seriously, had even sold a few pieces at a local art fair. Nothing that would make me rich, but enough to feel validated as an artist. My watercolors had evolved from tentative, safe landscapes to bolder, more emotional pieces, abstract expressions of pain and healing and transformation. One piece, which I titled Empty Chair, depicted the table from my failed birthday party in dark, moody colors, with a single empty chair illuminated by harsh light. It had been purchased by a woman who said it reminded her of waiting for her son to come home from war. I hadn't told her it was about waiting for my daughter to show up for my birthday. Art was funny that way. It meant what people needed it to mean. My apartment continued to transform. I'd gotten a cat, a rescue named Minerva, who was 10 years old and had been returned to the shelter twice because she was antisocial. She was perfect for me. She didn't demand constant attention, was content to sit beside me while I painted or read, and occasionally deigned to sit on my lap purring. We were two middle-aged females who'd been disappointed by others, finding solace in quiet companionship. I'd also started a small garden on my fire escape, herbs and cherry tomatoes in containers, nothing fancy, but something alive and growing that required my care and rewarded it with tangible results. There was something therapeutic about watering my basil plant each morning, about harvesting tomatoes for my salads, about nurturing something that actually thrived under my attention. 14 months after Emma's release from prison, Judith called me with news. Patricia, I saw Emma today. By accident, I was in Queens visiting a client and I stopped at a diner for lunch, and she was there. She was my waitress. My heart started pounding. Did she see you? Yes. She looked terrified at first, like she thought I was going to make a scene. But I let her wait on me. We didn't talk about anything important. She took my order, brought my food, asked if I needed anything else. She was professional. Polite. She looked tired, Patricia. And thin. But not broken. Just different. Different how? Quieter. Maybe. Less performative. The old Emma would have used seeing me as an opportunity to launch into explanations or apologies or manipulation. This Emma just did her job. When she brought my check, she said, "It's good to see you, Aunt Judith. I hope you're well." And that was it. She walked away. She let me go without trying to use me to get to you. I didn't know what to do with this information. It supported what Emma had been writing in her letters, that she was respecting boundaries, focusing on her own growth, not pushing for reconciliation. But was it real, or was it strategy? Was she genuinely changed, or just playing a longer game? What do you think I should do? I asked Judith. I think you should keep doing exactly what you're doing. Living your life. Being happy. If and when you're ready to consider letting Emma back in, you'll know. But don't let anyone, not me, not Emma, not even your own guilt, push you into anything before you're ready. More time passed. Spring became summer became fall. I went on a 2-week trip to Italy with Robert, my first real vacation in decades. We visited Florence and Rome and Venice, ate incredible food, saw astonishing art, made love in hotel rooms with views of ancient cities. It was the kind of trip I'd always dreamed of taking but had never allowed myself, because what if Emma needed me? What if there was a crisis? What if my being unavailable caused problems? But there was no crisis. Emma didn't even know I was gone. My life continued just fine without her in it. That realization was both freeing and desperately sad. When I returned from Italy, there was another letter waiting. This one was different from the others. Mom. I'm writing to tell you that I'm moving. Not far, just to a small apartment in Astoria that I can actually afford on my own. I've saved enough for first and last month's rent and a security deposit. It's a studio, barely 400 square feet, but it's mine. I've been approved to leave the halfway house early because I've met all my requirements ahead of schedule. This feels huge. After everything, the arrest, prison, the halfway house, the shame, I'm finally going to have my own space again. A door I can lock. A kitchen where I can cook my own meals. A window with a view that isn't controlled by someone else's rules. I know this probably doesn't matter to you. I know you've moved on, built a life without me. And you should have. You deserve peace and happiness and a life that isn't defined by my chaos. But I wanted you to know, I'm doing it, Mom. I'm building something from nothing. I'm becoming someone who can stand on her own 2 feet without expecting anyone else to hold her up. I'm becoming the person you tried to raise me to be before I decided I knew better. I don't know if we'll ever speak again. I don't know if you'll ever be able to forgive me or trust me or want me in your life. And I'm learning to be okay with that. I'm learning that I don't get to demand forgiveness just because I've changed. I'm learning that some things, once broken, stay broken. But I wanted you to know that your decision to hold me accountable, as much as I hated it, as much as I fought it, as much as I tried to paint you as the villain, it saved my life. Prison saved my life. Losing everything saved my life. Because it forced me to finally see who I'd become. And to decide if that was who I wanted to be. So thank you. For loving me enough to let me fall. For being strong enough to say no. For protecting yourself even when I tried to make you feel guilty for it. I'm not asking for a relationship. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just saying thank you. And goodbye, if that's what you need. I love you, Mom. I probably don't deserve to say that anymore, but it's true. Emma**. I read that letter through tears I couldn't control. It was the first time Emma had thanked me for holding her accountable. The first time she'd acknowledged that my boundaries had been an act of love, not cruelty. The first time she'd released me from the obligation to fix her, to save her, to be her emotional support system. It was the first time she'd let me go. And paradoxically, it was the first time I actually considered letting her back in. I took the letter to Dr. Kowalski, who read it carefully before looking up at me. "What are you feeling?" she asked. "Everything. Hope that she's really changed. Terror that she hasn't. Guilt for keeping her at a distance. Relief that she's respecting my boundaries. Grief for all the years we wasted. Anger that it took prison to get us here. I'm feeling everything." "That's appropriate. This is a significant moment." "I think I want to respond," I admitted. Not to open the floodgates or invite her back into my life completely, but just to acknowledge her growth. To tell her I'm proud of her for doing this work. "And if you do that, can you maintain your boundaries? Can you respond without it becoming an invitation for her to start asking for things again?" "I think so. I hope so." Dr. Kowalski nodded slowly. "Then maybe it's time. You've spent almost 2 years protecting yourself, healing, building a life that doesn't revolve around Emma. You're strong enough now to extend a hand without falling back into old patterns. But Patricia, you need to be very clear with yourself about what you're willing to offer. And you need to be prepared to pull back if Emma's response shows she hasn't really changed." That night, I sat down and wrote my first letter to Emma since she'd been arrested. Emma. I received your letter about the apartment. Congratulations. I know how hard you've worked to get to this point, and I'm genuinely proud of you for building something through your own efforts. I want to acknowledge what you said about accountability saving your life. That took courage to admit. And you're right, holding you accountable was one of the hardest things I've ever done. But I'm glad you understand now that it came from love, not cruelty. I'm not ready for us to have a relationship yet. I need you to understand that. I've spent the last 2 years healing from everything that happened between us, and I'm not willing to risk that healing until I'm certain you've truly changed. Words are important, but actions over time are what matter. So here's what I can offer right now. I can acknowledge your growth. I can be glad you're doing well. I can hope you continue on this path. But I can't be your mother again, not in the way I used to be. That version of us was toxic for both of us. If we ever build something new, it will have to be different, healthier boundaries, mutual respect, genuine reciprocity. Take care of yourself, Emma. Keep doing the work. Keep growing. If your transformation is real, time will prove it. And maybe, eventually, we can find a way forward. But there's no rush. You can wait. And so can I. Mom**. I mailed it before I could second guess myself. Emma's response came 2 weeks later. Mom. Thank you for writing back. You have no idea what it meant to see your handwriting on an envelope after all this time. I understand what you're saying about not being ready. I understand that I need to prove myself over time, not just with words. I understand that our old relationship was toxic and that if we ever have anything again, it needs to be completely different. I'm okay with waiting. I'm okay with proving myself. I'm okay with the possibility that we might never get back what we had, because honestly, what we had wasn't healthy anyway. I just want you to know that I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep working, keep growing, keep becoming someone better. Not because I'm trying to earn my way back into your life, but because I want to be that person for myself. But if someday, maybe months from now, maybe years, you decide you want to try having coffee or something, I'll be here. And if you never want that, I'll understand. Thank you for not giving up on me completely, even when I gave you every reason to. Emma**. And so a new pattern began. We wrote to each other, not frequently, maybe once every 2 months. The letters were careful, boundaried, nothing like our old relationship. Emma told me about her job, her apartment, her therapy breakthroughs. I told her about my painting, my volunteer work, my relationship with Robert, though I kept it vague, not quite ready to share that part of my life fully. We were rebuilding, slowly, with the understanding that what we were building might never look like what we'd lost. And maybe that was okay. Maybe what we'd lost needed to stay lost. 6 months after our correspondence resumed, Emma asked if we could meet for coffee. Not at her apartment or mine, but somewhere neutral. Somewhere public. Somewhere I could leave if I needed to. I thought about it for 3 days before responding. Yes. Let's meet. The coffee shop was in a neighborhood neither of us had history in, chosen specifically for its neutrality, a small place in the West Village with good espresso and enough ambient noise that any awkward silences wouldn't feel crushing. And as I sat at a corner table 20 minutes early, I realized I was more nervous about seeing my daughter than I'd been about anything in years. My hands shook slightly as I wrapped them around my latte. I changed outfits 3 times that morning, trying to find something that struck the right balance. Not too formal, not too casual, nothing that looked like I tried too hard but nothing that suggested I didn't care. I'd settled on dark jeans and a soft blue sweater, with the silver necklace Judith had given me for my 64th birthday. I'd told Robert where I was going. I'd told Judith. I'd even told Dr. Kowalski, who'd spent our session that week helping me prepare emotionally for whatever this meeting might bring. Remember, she'd said, you get to leave at any time. You get to end the conversation if it becomes uncomfortable. You don't owe Emma anything except basic courtesy. This is about seeing if connection is possible, not obligating yourself to forgiveness. I repeated those words in my head like a mantra. You don't owe her anything except basic courtesy. At precisely 11 o'clock, the door opened and Emma walked in. I almost didn't recognize her. The woman who entered the coffee shop bore little resemblance to the polished, perfectly styled daughter who'd gone to Rosewood while I sat at home alone on my birthday. This Emma was thinner, her face more angular, with lines around her eyes that hadn't been there 2 years ago. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, no expensive highlights, just her natural brown going slightly grey at the temples. She wore jeans and a plain black sweater, carried a worn backpack instead of a designer purse. She looked like someone who'd been through something hard and survived it. Our eyes met across the coffee shop, and I saw something in her expression that stopped my breath, genuine fear. Not the performative anxiety she displayed in court, but real, vulnerable fear. She was afraid of me. Afraid I'd reject her. Afraid this meeting would go badly. Afraid of losing something that, until recently, she hadn't valued. She got her coffee, black, simple, not the elaborate caramel macchiato with extra foam she used to order, and walked slowly to my table. "Hi, Mom," she said quietly, and I heard her voice crack on the second word. "Hello, Emma. Sit down." She sat across from me, careful to maintain distance, her hands wrapped around her cup the same way mine were. We looked at each other for a long moment, and I tried to see past the physical changes to figure out who this person actually was. "Thank you for meeting me," Emma said finally. "I know you didn't have to." "No, I didn't." She flinched slightly at my bluntness, but she didn't argue or defend. "You look good," she offered. "You look happy." "I am happy," I said. "I've built a good life for myself over the past 2 years." "I'm glad. You deserve that." She paused, seeming to gather courage. "I saw on Facebook, I know I'm not supposed to look at your profile, but I did, you went to Italy. I saw Aunt Judith's pictures." I waited to feel guilty about that, about the fact that I'd taken a dream vacation while Emma was struggling in her studio apartment, working at a diner. But the guilt didn't come. I'd earned that trip. I'd earned my happiness. It was wonderful, I said simply. Good. That's good. Emma took a sip of her coffee, her hands still shaking slightly. I don't really know how to do this. I practiced what I wanted to say, but now that you're here, it all feels wrong. Then don't say what you practiced. Just talk to me. She nodded, taking a breath. Okay. I want to tell you about something that happened in prison. There was this woman on my cell block, Angela. She was 60, in for embezzling from her employer. And she had a daughter who visited her every single week without fail. I watched them together through the glass partition, watched them talk on the phones, and I could see how much they loved each other. How the daughter didn't judge her mom or abandon her just because she'd messed up. And I felt so jealous. I wanted that so badly, wanted you to visit, wanted you to forgive me, wanted to go back to how things were before. I actually asked Angela about it once, asked her how her daughter could be so forgiving. And you know what she said? I shook my head. She said, my daughter can forgive me because I never hurt her. I stole from my job because I was desperate to keep our house after my husband died. I didn't steal from her. I didn't exploit her. I didn't make her responsible for my happiness. So she can visit me with love instead of resentment. Emma's eyes filled with tears. And that's when I realized, I couldn't have what Angela had with her daughter because I'd spent years making you responsible for my happiness, for my financial security, for my emotional well-being. I'd taken everything from you and given nothing back. Angela's daughter could forgive her because Angela had never done to her what I did to you. I felt my own eyes burning, but I wouldn't let myself cry yet. That's a painful realization. It destroyed me, Emma said quietly. Like, actually destroyed me for weeks. I stopped eating, stopped getting out of bed, just lay there thinking about every shitty thing I'd ever done to you. The therapist said I was having a breakdown. But I think it was actually a breakthrough. Because once I really saw what I'd done, once I stopped making excuses and playing victim, I could finally start changing. Is that when you started writing to me? Yeah. My therapist suggested it. She said I needed to take accountability without expecting anything in return. That real apologies don't demand forgiveness, they just acknowledge harm. Emma wiped her eyes with her sleeve. I'm sorry, I told myself I wouldn't cry. It's okay to cry. No, it's not. I don't get to cry and make you comfort me. That's the old pattern. I cry, you console me, I get what I want. She took a shaky breath. I'm trying to be different. We sat in silence for a moment. Around us, the coffee shop hummed with other people's conversations, other people's normal lives. I studied my daughter's face and tried to reconcile this person with the woman who'd pounded on my door, who'd called the police on me, who'd forged medical documents. Tell me about your apartment, I said finally. Emma's face brightened slightly. It's small. Really small. But it's mine. I've got a futon that serves as my couch and bed. A tiny kitchen where I cook actual meals now. I've been teaching myself from YouTube videos. A bathroom that's barely big enough to turn around in. But Mom, when I wake up in the morning and I'm in my own space I paid for with money I earned, it feels like such an accomplishment. It is an accomplishment. I've been thinking about going back to school, she continued, a little hesitantly. Nothing fancy, just community college. Maybe get a degree in social work or counseling. I've been volunteering at this women's shelter, helping women who are coming out of prison or abusive situations, and I love it. I feel like maybe I could actually be good at something that helps people instead of just taking from them. That sounds like meaningful work. It is. And it's weird, but I think going through what I went through, the arrest, prison, losing everything, actually makes me better at it. I can relate to these women in ways someone who hasn't hit rock bottom can't. I know what it feels like to have destroyed your own life and have to build from scratch. I nodded slowly. This was the longest conversation we'd had in years that wasn't about Emma needing something from me. She wasn't asking for money. She wasn't asking me to solve her problems. She was just sharing her life. Mom, Emma said, her voice dropping. Can I ask you something? And you can totally say no, but I need to know. Ask. Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive me? Not now, I know it's too soon. But someday. I considered the question carefully. Forgiveness was complicated. It wasn't a light switch you could flip. It was a process, a journey, something that might take years or might never fully arrive. I don't know, I said honestly. I can see that you're changing. I can acknowledge the work you're doing. But Emma, you hurt me in ways that changed who I am. You made me question my worth as a mother, as a person. You weaponized systems against me. You tried to steal from me. That's not something I can just forgive because you've been good for a year and a half. Emma nodded, her face crumpling slightly but her voice steady. I understand. That's fair. But, I continued, I'm open to the possibility. I'm open to us building something new, not the relationship we had, that was toxic for both of us, but maybe something healthier. Something with boundaries and mutual respect. Something where we both get to be whole people, not just mother and child. I want that, Emma said immediately. I want that so much. Then we need to be clear about expectations. I'm willing to meet for coffee like this, maybe once a month or so. I'm willing to exchange letters. I'm willing to slowly, carefully, see if we can rebuild trust. But Emma, the moment you start asking me for money or expecting me to solve your problems or crossing the boundaries I set, I'm gone, Emma finished. I know. I understand. And Mom, I swear to you, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to use you anymore. I want a relationship with you, but I want it to be real, not transactional. We finished our coffee talking about safer things, her job, my painting, the weather, Robert, I mentioned him briefly, testing the waters. Emma asked thoughtful questions and actually listened to the answers instead of just waiting for her turn to talk. When we finally stood to leave, there was an awkward moment where neither of us knew how to say goodbye. Can I hug you? Emma asked uncertainly. I hesitated, then nodded. She stepped forward carefully, and we embraced, brief, tentative, nothing like the tight hugs of my memories, but something. A starting point. Thank you for giving me a chance, Emma whispered. Don't make me regret it, I whispered back. We left the coffee shop separately. I walked to the subway feeling drained but not devastated. Cautiously hopeful but not naive. I'd seen Emma, had seen evidence of change, but I was still guarding my heart. Still protecting the peace I'd worked so hard to build. That night, Robert came over for dinner. I told him about the meeting while we cooked together in my kitchen, his arms occasionally wrapping around me from behind as I chopped vegetables. How do you feel? He asked. Confused. Hopeful. Terrified. Proud of myself for maintaining boundaries. Sad about all the years we wasted. That's a lot of feelings. Yeah. I turned in his arms to face him. But mostly I feel okay. Like whatever happens with Emma, I'm going to be okay. I've got my own life now. She doesn't get to destroy it again. He kissed my forehead. Good. You've worked too hard for your happiness. Don't let anyone take it from you. Emma and I did meet again the next month. And the month after that. Slowly, carefully, we began building something new. Not mother and child in the traditional sense, but two adults trying to figure out if they could have a healthy relationship despite their complicated history. There were good moments, Emma showing me photos of the women's shelter where she volunteered, her face animated as she talked about helping someone find housing or get a job. Me showing her my latest paintings, surprised by her genuine interest and thoughtful observations. Shared laughter over silly things, inside jokes from her childhood that we could finally revisit without pain. But there were also hard moments. Times when Emma's old patterns would flicker to the surface, a comment that felt like manipulation, a request that felt like a test. And each time, I had to decide whether to call her out or let it go, whether it was a slip or a reversion. Mostly, I called her out. Emma, that sounded like you're asking me to solve your problem for you. That's not the relationship we're building. And mostly, she'd catch herself. You're right. I'm sorry. Let me rephrase, I'm dealing with this issue, and I'd appreciate your advice, but I'm not asking you to fix it for me. It was exhausting sometimes, this constant vigilance. But it was also working. 2 years and 3 months after my failed birthday party, I turned 66 years old, and I learned that healing isn't about erasing the past, it's about building a present strong enough that the past can't destroy it anymore. I was planning another party. A smaller one this time, more intimate. Judith and Paul, Robert and Michelle, Rose from the community center, a few friends from my painting class. 12 people again, but different 12 people. People who had proven they valued me, who showed up when they said they would, who treated me with respect and kindness. I'd sent the invitations 3 weeks in advance, just like before. But this time, every single person had RSVP'd immediately. Not with "I'll try to make it," but with "I'll be there and what can I bring? And I'm so excited to celebrate you." The difference was staggering. I was in my kitchen the morning of the party, preparing food and arranging flowers, when my phone rang. Emma's name appeared on the screen. We'd exchanged numbers 6 months ago, after a year and a half of supervised contact had proven she could maintain boundaries. "Hi, Emma," I answered. "Hi, Mom. I know today's your birthday, and I know I'm not invited to your party, but I wanted to call and wish you a happy birthday. Is that okay?" My throat tightened. She wasn't invited, that was true. I'd thought about it, had even discussed it with Dr. Kowalski and Robert and Judith. But ultimately, I'd decided I wasn't ready. My birthday had become sacred, a symbol of me choosing myself, and I needed to protect it. "That's okay," I said. "Thank you for calling. I have something for you. Not a gift, exactly, but something I made. Can I drop it off? I won't come up, I'll just leave it with your doorman." "What is it?" "It's a scrapbook. I've been working on it in therapy. It's got photos from when I was little, from before everything got so messed up between us. And I wrote captions, honest ones, not the stories I used to tell myself. I thought maybe you'd want it. But if not, that's okay too." I thought about saying no. About protecting my birthday from any Emma-related complications. But I was also curious. "Okay," I said. "You can drop it off." "Thank you, Mom. Happy birthday. I hope it's everything you deserve." She hung up before I could respond. An hour later, the doorman called to say a package had been left for me. I went down and retrieved it, a handmade scrapbook with a simple cover, my name written in Emma's distinctive handwriting. I brought it upstairs and I opened it. The first page had a photo of Emma as a toddler, sitting on my lap, both of us laughing at something off camera. The caption read, "This is before I learned that your purpose was to give me things. When I still saw you as a person who loved me, not a resource to exploit. I wish I'd stayed this person." I turned the page. Emma at 7, holding up a drawing she'd made. The caption, "You praised everything I did, even when it was mediocre. You made me feel special." But I twisted that into entitlement. If everything I did was special, I must be special, and special people deserve special treatment. That wasn't your fault. That was me misunderstanding love for permission. Another page. Emma's high school graduation. "You worked double shifts for months to buy me that dress. I didn't even thank you properly. I was so focused on my friends, on being seen, that I didn't see you at all. I'm sorry." More pages, more photos, more brutally honest captions. Emma's wedding. "You gave us $10,000 toward this wedding. I complained it wasn't enough. I actually complained. Who does that?" Emma holding the keys to her condo. "You co-signed this loan even though you knew we couldn't really afford it. I pressured you. I made you feel like a bad mother if you said no. I manipulated you." And finally, the last page. No photo, just words written in Emma's handwriting. "Mom, There's no photo for this page because this is where our story broke. This is the birthday party I didn't attend, the turning point where you finally said enough. I hate this page. I hate what it represents. But I'm also grateful for it. Because this is where you chose yourself. This is where you stopped enabling me. This is where you loved me enough to let me fall. And that fall, painful as it was, devastating as it was, saved me. Thank you for the years of sacrifices I never appreciated. Thank you for the love I never deserved. Thank you for the boundaries I fought against. Thank you for being strong enough to stop saving me so I could finally learn to save myself. I don't know if we'll ever have the relationship we once had. I don't know if you'll ever fully trust me or forgive me. But I want you to know, I see you now. I see you as a person, not just as my mother. I see your worth, your strength, your beauty. And I'm proud to be your daughter, even if I spent most of my life making you ashamed to be my mother. Happy birthday, Mom. I hope your party is perfect. I hope you're surrounded by people who love you the way you deserve to be loved. I hope this year brings you everything you've earned through your courage and grace. Love, Emma, P.S. I'm 2 years sober from using you. One day at a time. I closed the scrapbook and I cried. Not the devastated tears of 2 years ago, but something softer, sadder, more complex. Grief for what we'd lost, yes. But also hope for what we might slowly, carefully build. I set the scrapbook on my shelf, next to my paintings and books. It would stay there, a reminder of both the worst and the possibility of better. The party that evening was exactly what I needed. My apartment filled with laughter and conversation, with people who genuinely cared about me. Judith gave a toast that made everyone cry, to Patricia, who taught us all that choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. And that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let someone you love face their own consequences. Robert gave me a painting he'd commissioned from a local artist, a watercolor of the Italian countryside we'd visited together, with a small inscription on the back. To many more adventures with the woman who taught me that it's never too late to start over. Michelle gave me a framed photo of the three of us from our last museum visit, with a note. Thank you for showing me what maternal love looks like when it's healthy. You've helped me heal too. Rose from the community center gave me a potted orchid and practical advice. These bloom once a year if you take care of them right. Kind of like trust. Hard to cultivate, but beautiful when it finally appears. We ate and drank and celebrated until late into the evening. When everyone finally left, I stood in my apartment, my home, my sanctuary, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Complete. Not because Emma had apologized or because we were rebuilding our relationship. Not because everyone had shown up to my party or because I'd gotten thoughtful gifts. But because I'd learned that I could be complete on my own. That my worth wasn't determined by whether my daughter valued me. That I could build a life full of love and meaning and joy even without the relationship I'd thought defined me. I picked up my phone and I sent Emma a text. Thank you for the scrapbook. It meant a lot. I'm not ready for you to come to my parties yet. But I'm glad you're doing well. Keep going. Her response came immediately. That's all I needed to hear. Happy birthday, Mom. Keep being happy. 6 months later, Emma completed her probation. All requirements met, all restitution payments made, with the help of a better job she'd gotten at the women's shelter, now working as a program coordinator. The restraining order expired. Legally, there was nothing preventing us from having whatever relationship we chose. We met for coffee to mark the occasion. Emma looked healthier than I'd seen her in years. She'd gained back some weight, her skin had color, her eyes were clear. She'd cut her hair short, a practical style that suited her. She wore clothes from Target instead of Bergdorf's, carried a backpack she'd gotten at the thrift store. She looked like someone who'd learned that her worth wasn't measured by material things. I got into college, she told me, her face lighting up with genuine pride. Community college, starting in the fall. They have a program for formerly incarcerated people, reduced tuition, support services, the whole thing. I'm going to study social work. That's wonderful, Emma. I'm proud of you. Thanks. She paused, then reached into her backpack. I have something else to tell you. And something to give you. She pulled out a check. $5,000. Made out to me. What is this? I asked, staring at it. It's the money I asked you for that started all of this. The $5,000 for the vacation that was really for bills I couldn't pay because Brandon and I were living beyond our means. I saved it. It took me 2 years, but I saved it. Not because the court ordered me to, the restitution covered your legal fees. But because I wanted to prove to myself that I could do what I'd promised. That I could pay you back instead of always taking. I looked at the check, then at my daughter. Emma, you need this money for school. No, she interrupted firmly. I have financial aid. I have a job. I have a payment plan worked out. I don't need this money. But I need to give it to you. Please, Mom. Let me do this. Let me prove that I've changed. I took the check, my hands shaking slightly. It wasn't about the money, I didn't need it. But it was about what it represented. Accountability. Follow-through. Emma making good on a debt without being forced. Thank you, I said quietly. There's one more thing. Emma pulled out a small wrapped package. I know we don't really do birthday gifts anymore, and I missed yours again this year. I wasn't invited, which I completely understand, but I made you something. For no reason except that I wanted to. I unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a small painting, amateurish, clearly done by someone without formal training, but earnest in its attempt. It showed two people at a table, their faces obscured, just silhouettes. But between them was a space, a gap, and in that gap were tiny seeds planted in soil. The caption at the bottom read, "things growing in empty spaces." I've been taking an art class, Emma explained, suddenly shy. Nothing like your beautiful watercolors. But my therapist thought it would be good for me to try expressing things creatively instead of always talking. This is supposed to be us. The space between us where there used to be all this toxic stuff. And I painted seeds there because I'm hoping something new can grow. Not the old relationship, but something different. Something healthier. I stared at the painting, this clumsy, heartfelt gift from my daughter. It wasn't technically good. The proportions were off, the colors muddy. But it was honest. It was vulnerable. It was Emma trying to communicate something she didn't have words for. It's perfect, I said, and I meant it. We didn't become best friends overnight. We didn't fall into easy closeness or pretend the past hadn't happened. But we continued meeting, monthly coffee dates that sometimes extended to lunch or a walk through the park. We exchanged occasional texts, nothing heavy, just small updates about our lives. Emma sent me photos of her college acceptance letter, her first day of classes, a good grade on a paper. I sent her pictures of my latest paintings, Robert's cat, who hated Minerva, a sunset from Judith's lake house. We were learning each other again, carefully, with the understanding that trust was something you built slowly, with consistent action over time. On Emma's 42nd birthday, I sent her flowers. Not expensive ones. I wasn't returning to the pattern of funding her life. But a modest arrangement with a card that said, "Happy birthday. Proud of how far you've come." She called me crying. "Thank you, Mom. This is the first birthday gift you've given me since I got out of prison. I didn't think I'd ever get that again." "You earned it," I said simply. And she had. 3 years after my failed birthday party, I had another celebration. This one was for my 67th birthday, but it was also a celebration of my first art show. A small gallery in Brooklyn was featuring my work for a month. The opening reception fell on my birthday weekend, and I invited everyone in my life. Including Emma. The invitation was careful, boundaried. "I'm having an art opening that happens to fall on my birthday weekend. If you'd like to come, I'd be happy to see you there. No pressure, no expectations. Just an invitation to share something I'm proud of." Emma responded immediately, "I would love to come. Thank you for including me. I'm so proud of you, Mom." The gallery was packed. Judith and Paul, Robert and Michelle, Rose and other friends from the community center, my painting instructor and classmates, neighbors from my building. And in the back, arriving late, dressed simply in black pants and a nice blouse, was Emma. She walked through the gallery looking at my paintings, the dark, turbulent pieces from my early grief, the gradually lighter works as I healed, the recent pieces full of color and life and joy. She stopped in front of empty chair, the painting of my failed birthday party. I watched her stand there for a long time, her hand covering her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Finally, she walked over to where I stood with Robert. "Hi, Mom," she said quietly. "Your work is beautiful. All of it. But especially that one." She gestured toward empty chair. "It's devastating. And honest. And it tells the truth about what I did to you." "It tells the truth about a moment in time," I corrected gently. "It's not the whole story anymore." "Can I ask what you'd call a painting of us now? If you were going to paint where we are today?" I thought about it. Maybe 2 women at a table. Just 2 people, learning to be honest with each other. Nothing dramatic. Just real. Emma smiled through her tears. "I'd like to see that painting someday." "Maybe I'll paint it," I said. "Someday." At the end of the evening, after most people had left, Emma approached me one last time. "Mom, can I say something? Something I've been wanting to say for a while. Of course. I know we're rebuilding. I know we're in this careful, boundaried place where we're still figuring out if we can trust each other. And I understand that. I'm grateful for it. Actually, it's more than I deserve. But I want you to know that you calling the police on me, you pressing charges, you letting me go to prison, that was the most loving thing you ever did for me. I felt Robert's hand tighten on mine, supportive, anchoring. Emma continued, all those years you were giving me money and bailing me out and making my problems disappear. That wasn't love. That was fear. Fear that I wouldn't survive without you. Fear that I'd stop needing you. Fear that if you said no, I'd leave. But letting me fall, letting me face consequences, letting me learn I could survive without using you as a crutch, that was real love. That was believing in me enough to let me find my own strength. It didn't feel like love at the time, I admitted. It felt like I was destroying our relationship. You were destroying our old relationship, Emma said. Which needed to be destroyed. It was toxic for both of us. But you were also giving us the chance to build something real. Something healthy. Something where I see you as a person, not just a resource. Where you can trust me not to exploit you. Where we can be equals instead of me being the eternal child and you being the eternal martyr. She paused, wiping her eyes. So thank you. For being strong enough to let me go. For loving me enough to stop enabling me. For giving me the chance to become someone you could actually be proud of. I pulled Emma into a hug, a real one this time, not tentative or careful but genuine. And I held my daughter while she cried, and I cried too. Not tears of grief anymore, but tears of release. Of letting go of what we'd been and accepting what we'd become. I am proud of you, I whispered. Not because you're perfect or because you never hurt me, but because you did the work. Because you faced what you'd done and you changed. That takes more courage than most people ever have to find. When we pulled apart, Robert handed us both tissues, and we laughed through our tears. Okay, Emma said, composing herself. I should go. This is your night, your celebration. I don't want to take over. Emma, I interrupted. Would you like to come to dinner with us? Nothing fancy, just the group going to that Italian place down the street. You're welcome to join us if you want. Emma's eyes widened. Really? You want me there? I'm inviting you, aren't I? But this is your birthday celebration. Your people. I don't want to intrude. You're not intruding. You're my daughter. And I think we've reached a point where I can include you in my life without it consuming my life. So yes, I want you there. If you want to be there. I do, Emma said immediately. I really, really do. At dinner, surrounded by the people I loved, Judith and Paul arguing good-naturedly about politics, Robert telling stories that made everyone laugh, Michelle and Emma discovering they'd both volunteered at the same women's shelter, Rose holding court at the end of the table with her sharp observations about life, I felt something I'd never quite felt before. Whole. Not because I'd forgiven Emma completely, though I was closer to that than I'd ever thought possible. Not because our relationship was perfect, because it wasn't and might never be. But because I'd learned that I could love my daughter without being destroyed by her. That I could set boundaries without guilt. That I could protect myself and still leave room for connection. I'd learned that being a good mother didn't mean sacrificing myself on the altar of maternal love. It meant teaching my daughter, through boundaries, through consequences, through my own example, how to be a whole person who could love others without consuming them. And I'd learned that healing wasn't about erasing the past or pretending it hadn't happened. It was about building a present strong enough that the past couldn't destroy it anymore. Before we left the restaurant, Emma pulled me aside one more time. Mom, I have one more gift. I didn't want to give it to you at the gallery in front of everyone. She handed me an envelope. Inside was a card with a simple message. Asterisk mom asterisk. Asterisk 6 to 7 reasons I'm grateful for you asterisk. Asterisk 1. You never gave up on me, even when you gave up on the old version of our relationship asterisk. Asterisk 2. You taught me what real boundaries look like asterisk. Asterisk 3. You showed me that accountability is an act of love asterisk. Asterisk 4. You painted your pain into something beautiful asterisk. Asterisk 5. You built a life that didn't revolve around me asterisk. 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 Asterisk 67. You're teaching me what it means to be a strong woman who chooses herself without apology asterisk. Asterisk happy birthday, Mom. Here's to the woman you've always been and the woman you're still becoming. Asterisk. Asterisk love, asterisk. Asterisk Emma, asterisk. Asterisk P.S. I'm 3 years sober from using you. And I'm never going back. Asterisk. I folded the card and put it back in the envelope, my throat too tight to speak. Thank you, I finally managed. Thank you for letting me come tonight, Emma said. For including me in your life again. I know it's scary for you. I know you're taking a risk. I promise I won't make you regret it. Just keep doing what you're doing, I said. Keep growing. Keep being honest. Keep respecting boundaries. That's all I need. I will, Emma promised. I will. And as I watched her leave the restaurant, watched her walk into the night with her thrift store backpack and her hard-won dignity, I realized something profound. I'd gotten my daughter back. Not the daughter I'd lost, but a different person, someone real, someone flawed, someone who'd been broken and had learned to rebuild herself not with my money or my intervention, but with her own effort and courage. And I'd gotten myself back too. Not the martyred mother or the endless giver or the woman who'd set herself on fire to keep others warm. But Patricia Brennan, artist, friend, partner, volunteer, teacher. A woman with boundaries and self-respect and a life that was fully, completely, joyfully her own. If you've made it to the end of this story, if you've traveled with me through birthday parties and courtrooms and coffee shops and art galleries, then you know what it means to survive the people who should have protected you. You know what it takes to rebuild yourself when everything falls apart. You know the complicated, painful, beautiful truth that sometimes loving someone means letting them fall so they can learn to stand on their own. Leave a comment and tell me your story. Tell me how you survived. Tell me how you learned to choose yourself. Tell me it's possible to rebuild after betrayal. Because it is possible. I'm living proof. The path from that empty table with the deflating balloons to this full life I've built wasn't straight or easy or without setbacks. But it was mine. Every painful step, every boundary I set, every time I chose myself instead of sacrificing for someone who wouldn't appreciate it, all of it led me here. To this moment. This life. This version of myself I'd never known was possible. And you know what? I like her. This woman I've become. This Patricia who paints and loves and laughs and says no when she means no. This woman who survived her daughter's betrayal and came out stronger. This woman who learned that the opposite of maternal love isn't cruelty, it's boundaries. My phone buzzed as I was getting ready for bed that night. A text from Emma. Asterisk thank you for tonight. It was the best birthday gift I could have given you. The chance to celebrate you surrounded by people who see your worth. Sleep well, Mom. You've earned your peace. Asterisk. I smiled and set down my phone without responding immediately. Because for once, I didn't need to respond right away. Emma could wait. I could take my time, could prioritize my own rest, could trust that our relationship was strong enough now to handle me not being immediately available. That was growth. For both of us. As I turned off my light and Minerva curled up beside me, I thought about the woman who'd sat alone at that table 2 years ago, waiting for people who never came. I wanted to tell her that it would be okay. That the humiliation and pain of that night would eventually transform into strength. That losing her daughter would lead to finding herself. I wanted to tell her, asterisk you're going to survive this. You're going to thrive. You're going to learn that you're enough, all by yourself. And when your daughter finally earns her way back into your life, you'll be strong enough to let her in without losing yourself again. Asterisk. Asterisk you're going to be okay. Better than okay. Asterisk. Asterisk you're going to be free. Asterisk. And I was. Oh, you enjoyed this story? Please consider subscribing to this channel for more stories about people who had to make impossible choices, who rebuilt themselves after betrayal, who learned that self-protection isn't selfishness. Check the description box below for similar stories, and don't forget to leave a comment sharing your own experience with setting boundaries, surviving family betrayal, or choosing yourself when it was hard. Remember, you are allowed to protect yourself. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to be happy, even if someone who hurt you isn't. You are allowed to set boundaries without guilt. And you are allowed to love someone while also refusing to let them destroy you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And remember, your peace matters. Your happiness matters. You matter.